Chapter 99. Yi Xian. Mr. Yi. Big brother. When Yi Xian appeared in front of everyone, there were many exclamations. Boom! He took a step forward and the ground exploded. Before the crowd could react, Yi Xian had already appeared in front of the father and son of the Yi family. Under their horrified gazes, Yi Xian lifted the father and son of the Yi family into the air. How did my sister die? Why did my family appear in capital city? Yi Xian's voice was like the nine nether and his face was like the king of hell. He gripped the necks of the father and son of the Yi family with both hands, causing their faces to turn purple. It was as if Yi Xian would break their necks in the next moment. Big brother, this matter has nothing to do with father and grandfather, Yi Xian said with a trembling voice and quickly walked towards Yi Xian. Do you believe that I will really kill you if you take another step forward? Yi Xian turned around and looked at Yi Ping. When he opened and closed his eyes, a terrifying bloody light spread out. His sinister gaze instantly made Yi Ping stop in his tracks, as his body trembled uncontrollably. Mr. Yi, this matter really has nothing to do with the Yi family. It's Qinglong's fault for failing to protect you. Please punish me. Qinglong looked ashamed and immediately knelt on the ground. Xian, let them go. Yi Xian's mother said weakly, making Yi Xian's expression stiffen. He took a deep look at the father and son of the Yi family before throwing them on the ground. Mother. Yi Xian tried his best to suppress his terrifying aura and quickly walked towards Yi Xian's mother, only to see her lifeless eyes. Xian, you save Ling. Mother. I beg you. Yi Xian's mother grabbed Yi Xian's arm tightly and fainted because of her agitation. Supporting Yi Xian's body, Yi Xian took a deep breath and slowly exhaled. His ferocious and sinister face gradually calmed down, and a smile gradually appeared on his face. However, when one looked at him, one would feel a bone-chilling coldness. If the creatures in the battlefield saw Yi Xian's expression, they would scream and flee in all directions. This was because this was the unique smile of the undying heavenly sovereign. Whenever this smile appeared on Yi Xian's face, it meant that something terrible was about to happen. Teacher Yun, please help my mother back to her room to rest. Yi Xian didn't ask why Yun Mengyao was here. He handed the unconscious Mother Yi to Yun Mengyao. Yun Mengyao nodded and supported Mother Yi to walk into the room. In the inner hall, the father and son of the Yi family were lying on the ground, panting heavily. Clearly, Yi Xian had almost killed the two of them just now. The father and son of the Yi family had not recovered from the shock even after a long time. At this moment they were still in deep fear. Yi Ping's face was pale, and he didn't dare to interrupt at this time. Qinglong had been kneeling on the ground, and because of his guilt, he didn't dare to look at Yi Xian. Yi Xian strolled to the front of the crystal coffin with a smile on his face. He quietly looked at Yi Ling, who seemed to be asleep in the coffin and didn't say anything for a long time. Qinglong, tell me what happened. After a full 10 minutes, Yi Xian said softly. Mr. Yi, a month ago. Qinglong said bitterly as he looked at Yi Xian's back and slowly told him what happened. A month ago. Because Yi Xian hadn't returned home for a long time, Mother Yi missed Yi Xian. At Yi Ling-er's suggestion, the family took a plane to capital city to visit Yi Xian. The Yi family originally wanted to ease their relationship with Yi Xian, and they also learned from Yi Ping that Yi Xian's mother had come to capital city. Naturally, they made a lot of preparations, hoping to get Mother Ye's forgiveness so that Yi Xian and his mother could return to the Yi family. When Qinglong got the news that Mother Yi had come to capital city, he personally led people to pick her up at the airport. Under the solemn and cautious reception of the two parties, there was still an attack on Yi Xian's family. When Mother Yi and the others just got off the plane, dozens of thugs appeared out of nowhere, holding a large number of high-tech weapons, and wanted to kill Mother Yi and the others at the airport. Fortunately, the Yi family and Qinglong had a large number of ancient martial arts ability users with them, and they engaged in a life-and-death battle with these thugs. However, the other party was already prepared, and the Yi family and Qinglong's people suffered heavy casualties. If it wasn't for the fact that Yi Xian had refined 2 jade sword pendants for Mother Yi and Yi Linger, allowing them to erupt with the might of a Xiantian realm martial artist at a critical moment, Mother Yi, Azure Dragon, and the others would have died on the spot in that battle. How could human strength resist high-tech weapons? Although the 2 jade sword pendants killed a large number of thugs, Yiling was still shot in the heart by a laser weapon and died. Under the protection of the remaining people, Mother Yi and the others safely left the airport. After that, the Wuhan Bureau was mobilized to continuously track down the person behind the attack, but they couldn't find any clues. For the safety of Yi Xian and the others, Mother Yi and the others temporarily stayed in the Yi family. After all, the Yi family was located in a military compound, and there were heavy guards all around. The Wuhan Bureau also sent a large number of ancient martial arts ability users to protect the safety of Yi Xian's family day and night. During this period, Qing Long and the others kept calling Yi Xian, but he couldn't pick up, and the messages they sent were like stones in the sea. Originally, Yiling should have been buried early, but under Mother Ye's strong insistence, she hoped to wait for Yi Xian to come back and see his sister one last time before holding the funeral. Thus, the scene that Yi Xian saw before happened. After Qing Long finished narrating the incident, the entire inner hall also quieted down. However, Yi Xian's face was expressionless as he quietly looked at Yiling in the crystal coffin. When his eyes opened and closed, a bloody light flashed across. Yi Xian, it's because I didn't protect her well that Ling met with this disaster. If you want to kill someone, kill me. Yi Songhai said with a trembling voice. Bang! All of a sudden, Yi Xian slapped out with his palm, and the crystal coffin lid was directly pushed open. An ice-cold aura assaulted his face. It was obvious that this crystal coffin had a freezing technique, which was why it was able to preserve Yilinger's body so well. Under everyone's surprised gaze, Yi Xian gently stroked Yilinger's cheek and said in a gentle voice, "Little sister, sleep a little longer. It won't be long before I wake you up." Mr. The dead can't be brought back to life. My condolences," Qing Long said with a trembling voice. Clearly, he thought that Yi Xian was saying such nonsense because he was too sad. "Big brother, it's better to bury little sister as soon as possible." Yi Ping choked. "Yi Xian, although you don't acknowledge me as your father, Ling is still my daughter after all. I'll personally take care of her funeral. Consider it as making up for all the wrong I've done to Ling all these years," Yi Songhao pleaded with a trembling voice. He suddenly turned around. The blood light around Yi Xian's body was like an illusion as it gradually covered his body. He slowly walked towards the outside world, and his ancient and lonely voice sounded out in the inner hall. "I will definitely return within 3 months. Ling body must be preserved completely. If anything happens to her body by the time I return, your Yi family will be buried with her." The bloody light spread and rushed into the sky. Under everyone's surprised gaze, Yi Xian stepped into the sky and suddenly disappeared from everyone's sight. Mr. Yi, what are you going to do?" Qing Long murmured in shock. Can Big Brother bring Ling back to life?" Yi Ping said in horror. "Nonsense, how can a dead person be brought back to life? Even the legendary immortals don't have this ability." Yi Songhao reprimanded softly, but there was still a look of confusion in his eyes. In the thousands of miles of sky, the void exploded. A bloody stream of light tore through the endless sky and rushed towards the direction of Heartbreak Mountain. Heartbreak Mountain, Bloodsea Battlefield. Yuan Ling, Undying Immortal Sutra. Yi Xian's mind was filled with thoughts. Although he was an immortal cultivator in the Tribulation Transcendent stage and indeed did not have the ability to bring Yiling back to life, Yi Xian was very sure that Yuan Ling, who was in the Bloodsea Battlefield, was mysterious and had the Undying Immortal Sutra in his hands. He definitely had a way to bring Yiling back to life. Chapter 100. Heartbreak Mountain, Bloodsea Battlefield. The muddy yellow sky, the blood-colored muddy ground, and countless white bones were scattered all over the ground. There was also an extremely dense smell of blood drifting in the air, giving people a nauseating feeling. Splash! On both sides of the blood sea, all living creatures were dead silent. Only the long river of blood flowed and produced the sound of huge waves. At the end of the blood sea, a bronze gate stood there as if it had been standing there since ancient times. It gave people a sense of vicissitudes. A bronze scripture was suspended high in the sky, sealing the shattered spatial barrier. A black shadow was sitting cross-legged here, making it impossible to see what he looked like. Swish! A ray of bloody flowing light cut through the endless sky and quietly appeared in front of the shadow. "Yuan Ling, I need your help." Yixian went straight to the point and did not waste any time. The boundless secular world, the 7 emotions and 6 desires. Are you not tired of it? Yuanling opened his eyes and said in a cold voice, Are you going to help me or not? Yixian narrowed his eyes and said, What is it? Yuanling rose from the void and looked directly at Yixian with his bright eyes. A deep look flashed across his eyes. I want to know how the dead can be revived. After Yixian finished speaking, Yuanling held his breath and looked deeply at Yixian. Then he laughed mockingly and said, Birth, old age, sickness, and death are predestined by the heavens and the fate of mortals. You want to revive the dead? That's just wishful thinking. I can't help you with this. Fate? Yixian sneered and said, I don't believe in fate. I believe that my fate is up to me and not the heavens. Looking at Yixian's cold face, Yuanling sighed and said, Yixian, listen to my advice. Everything in the mortal world is but an illusion. After 100 years, everything will turn to dust. Why are you so obsessed with the things in the mortal world? Yixian looked at Yuanling with a deep gaze and said, Everyone has their own obsession. You are no exception. Some people and things in the mortal world are my obsession. You disappoint me too much. I won't help you. Yuanling's voice was cold as he refused. Tell me, what will it take for you to help me? Yixian sneered and said. Yixian knew that Yuanling was setting up a big game. In this game he was a very important part. Today, he returned to the Bloodsea battlefield and asked Yuanling to help him. This was probably part of Yuanling's plan. It's not that I don't want to help you, but you have to know that allowing a mortal to come back to life is a violation of the cycle of life and death. If the people of the earthly immortal dimension notice it, then both of us will suffer unprecedented danger. Yuanling spoke with a gloomy voice. Rumble. The Bloodsea surged and evil qi filled the air. Yixian's forehead shone and a 3-inch halberd emerged from his forehead. As the 3-inch halberd expanded in the bloody light, it became 1,000 feet long blood halberd and stood between the heavens and the earth. Countless dead souls wailed and the vast blood sea churned. When the heaven-destroying halberd appeared, an extremely violent mood filled the entire blood sea battlefield. Seeing this scene, Yuanling's aura suddenly became gloomy and he roared at Yixian, Yixian, do you want to attack me? Yuanling, you and I are the same. We will do anything to achieve our goals. I hope you won't force me. Yixian put his hands behind his back and looked coldly at Yuanling, as if he would attack at any moment. Clearly Yixian was not just saying. If Yuanling did not help him, he would have to shed all pretense of cordiality and have a great battle with him. Looking at the evil aura around Yixian's body that soared into the sky, Yuanling's fists would occasionally clench and loosen. The black aura around his body fluctuated to the extreme. It was obvious that his mind was furious to the extreme, and he seemed to be weighing something. Phew! Yuanling exhaled a mouthful of turbid air. Her tightly clenched fists finally loosened, and her gaze towards Yixian deepened once more. Yixian, do you still remember that when you first entered the Bloodsea battlefield, you were already a dead person? If I had not passed on the immortal scripture to you, how could you have achieved what you have today? Yuanling laughed self-deprecatingly. That's right. If it were not for you, there would not be Yixian today. But don't forget, you are just a weapon spirit and I am your master. Yixian smiled mysteriously. Yuanling's aura was cold. He was about to angrily rebuke him, but he swallowed his words back. Good. I was not wrong about you. Yuanling laughed coldly. Take back the heaven-destroying halberd. I will tell you how to come back from the dead. As for whether you can do it, it will all depend on your own ability. After a battle in his heart, Yuanling knew that now was not the time to fall out with Yixian. He could only compromise. This was also an act of helplessness. Buzz! The 1,000 feet long blood halberd turned into a ray of bloodlight and merged into Yixian's forehead. The evil qi that filled the sky also disappeared at this moment, and the world became quiet. The shocking battle dissipated into nothingness. The two of them sat cross-legged facing each other. Yuanling also slowly revealed a secret that Yixian did not know. The world Yixian was in was actually an abandoned land. It was also called the prison of heaven and earth by the people of the earth immortal realm. For thousands of years, any immortal who committed a crime would have their cultivation destroyed and thrown into the abandoned land. They would be forever trapped in the cycle of reincarnation, and would never be able to return to the earth immortal realm. These immortals who had their cultivation destroyed, because of their unwillingness, wanted to cultivate the body of an immortal in the banished land and return to the earth immortal realm. This was why the world had the legend of immortal cultivators. However, 10,000 years ago the ancient war started. Just the earth immortal realm alone was enough to destroy mountains and rivers. This also caused the people of the earth immortal realm to completely seal off the banished land. Since then, the world changed and spiritual energy did not exist in the world. However, the 6 paths of reincarnation, the cycle of heaven and earth. Although the banished land did not have spiritual energy and the immortal cultivators disappeared without a trace. After death, people had to be reincarnated. This was the rule of heaven and earth. Even immortals could not change it. Hell was born and was divided into 2 camps, east and west. The east was called hell and the west was called hell. They were in charge of the 6 paths of reincarnation, and helped the souls of the dead to be reincarnated. However, in the banished land the world changed and spiritual energy did not exist in the world. 10,000 years ago, hell was still under the control of the exiled immortals. They called themselves hell and god of the underworld. They had countless ghost servants and death gods under their command. However, as time passed, there was no longer a supply of spiritual chi in the world. The so-called Yama gods and underworld gods all died of old age in the long river of history. The Yama hell was also empty. Only the 6 paths of reincarnation continued to operate, which was why there was not much chaos. After Yuanling finished his story, he looked deeply at Yixian and said, "Although there are no living creatures in hell, the rules of the 6 paths of reincarnation operate there. You are only in the tribulation stage. If you forcefully bring the souls of the dead back to the human world, you will definitely suffer an unimaginable disaster. Tell me, how do I enter hell?" Yixian narrowed his eyes and asked. Chapter 101. Yuanling growled, "Yixian, are you crazy? The 6 paths of reincarnation are not child's play. Even a primordial unity golden immortal would not dare to touch it. Otherwise, his body and soul would be destroyed. I just want to know how to enter the hell of Yama. I don't want to hear your nonsense." Yixian's eyes were cold, and his voice was extremely gloomy. How could Yixian not know the dangers of the hell of Yama? However, when he recalled Mother Ye's heartbroken face, the so-called danger was not worth mentioning. He must bring Yiling-er's soul back to the human world. After all, Yixian would leave Mother Yi sooner or later to pursue the Tongtian Dao that he wanted. After he left, if Mother Yi did not have Yiling-er to accompany her, would she die alone? Stupid! Do you know that even if you can enter the hell of Yama, when you disturb the 6 paths of reincarnation, the terrifying power of the laws will instantly destroy your body and soul. You don't even want your life for a mere mortal? Yuanling was completely enraged, and he loudly rebuked Yixian. "You can't stop me," Yixian said in a low voice. Good. Yuanling was so irritable that he was going crazy. He sneered and said, "Since you want to die, I'll fulfill your wish. This is the method to open the hell of Yama. If anything happens to you, don't say that I won't save you." Yuanling directly shot a ray of bloodlight at Yixian, which was reflected in Yixian's sea of consciousness. A set of inexplicable and obscure method was also engraved in Yixian's mind. "Thank you." Yixian stood up from the air. When he took a step forward, he returned to his original path. Looking at Yixian's gradually disappearing figure, Yuanling's aura became gloomy and terrifying. Finally, he roared loudly, "Yixian, remember this. When your life is in danger, summon the heaven-punishing halberd. Perhaps it can save your life." Hearing Yuanling's reminder, Yixian's lips curled into a strange smile, and he disappeared from Yuanling's sight. Wang! As Yixian left, the endless sea of blood surged. A blood-red shadow appeared beside Yuanling, and said in a cold and gloomy voice, "Are you crazy? You actually let him go to hell. Do you know how important he is to us? If anything happens to him, when will we be able to see the light of day again?" In response to the blood-red shadow's reprimand, Yuanling's aura was cold and gloomy. He said, "If I don't tell him, I'm afraid there will be a great battle between us. You and I can't bear the consequences. But you have to know that although the 6 Tao precepts in the abandoned land are incomplete, They are still evolved from the precepts of heaven and earth. Even if you and I were in our best condition, we wouldn't dare to say that we could resist it with all our might. If he dies under the 6 Tao precepts, then... The blood-red shadow was worried and even hesitated to speak. Don't worry, he won't die. After all, the heaven-punishing halberd is an ancient killing weapon. When he is in danger, it will definitely save his life. This time he will go to hell to learn a lesson and let him know that there is always someone better than him. Yuan Ling laughed coldly. Obviously, everything was within his calculations. You are too arrogant. I see that this boy has already formed a great momentum, and he vaguely has an aura that is not inferior to yours and mine. How can you be so sure that everything is within your calculations? The blood-red shadow sneered. Humph, after all, he has only cultivated for 4 years. Even if he is extremely scheming and shrewd, how can he be compared to you and me? Don't worry, it won't be long before you and I reappear in the Earth Immortal world. Yuan Ling was extremely confident. The blood-red shadow shook his head and sighed before disappearing into the sea of blood again. Heaven and Earth, primordial spirit void. The discussion between the two fell into Yi Xian's ears. This also made Yi Xian's expression calm. However, when he opened and closed his eyes, a trace of contempt flashed across his eyes. Yi Xian had a great secret. This secret was known to no one except himself. This was also his greatest trump card. It was also because of this secret that Yi Xian knew from the beginning that Yuan Ling was not the immortal scripture's vessel spirit at all. Instead, he was an existence whose primordial spirit had left his body. This secret was related to the immortal scripture. It was also the most important scripture of the immortal scripture. The immortal scripture had existed since the beginning of heaven and earth. Under the vast passage of time, although not many people had obtained this scripture, it was still not in the minority. However, the only person who could truly comprehend the immortal scripture was Yi Xian alone. Yi Xian could merge into the void and not be detected by Yuan Ling because of this secret. The immortal scripture forbidden chapter. What was the forbidden chapter? It was not tolerated by heaven and earth. It did not appear in the eyes of living creatures. It went against time and space and disrupted the laws of heaven and earth. This was the forbidden chapter. If the immortal scripture was a supreme immortal cultivation technique, then the forbidden chapter was the strongest of the strongest. It had never truly revealed itself in the world. The primordial spirit void was one of the most basic techniques in the taboo chapter, and it was also something that Yi Xian had just grasped. As his cultivation deepened, the taboo chapter's taboo technique would gradually reveal its terror. Flowing light flashed and the void crisscrossed. Yi Xian truly disappeared from the blood sea battlefield. Yuan Ling and the blood-colored shadow did not know that their various schemes and arrangements were all seen by Yi Xian. What they did not know was that the immortal scripture actually hid the most important scripture, but it was obtained by Yi Xian. This was also the biggest variable. If the two of them knew about this, who knew how they would feel? The void crisscrossed, and the blood light was faintly discernible. Yi Xian's physical body tore through the endless void. When he reappeared, he was already standing in a mass grave. According to the description of the technique given by Yuan Ling, if one wanted to open the hell of Yama, one needed to find a place of extreme yin. Only then could one communicate with the gate of the hell of Yama. This mass grave was extremely dense with yin qi. It was also the most suitable place to open the hell of Yama. A cool breeze blew, causing Yi Xian's hair to flutter. He drew a circle with his palms. His body was surrounded by a misty blood-colored light. Streaks of blood-colored runes shot out from his palms. An inexplicable scripture was uttered from his mouth. Woo-woo-woo-woo. The yin qi was vast and mighty. An inexplicable fluctuation bloomed with Yi Xian as the center. This part of the world slowly darkened. Yin qi vortex gradually formed in the void. Buzz. The void trembled. The sky was gloomy. Yin qi vortex appeared in the void. The wails of dead souls could be heard from the vortex. At a glance, it was as if one soul was about to be sucked in. The gate of the hell of Yama had already opened. Yi Xian's eyes were deep. Without any hesitation, he took a step forward and entered the yin qi portal. Buzz. As Yi Xian entered the hell of Yama, the yin qi portal quickly closed until it disappeared without a trace. It was as if it had never appeared in the world. Chapter 102. Silence, silence, a deathly silence. This was a boundlessly dark and vast space. There was no sky or earth. As far as the eye could see, there were only countless dazzling lights that stretched across the sky. Woo! A cold wind blew and a chill invaded his body. Even though Yi Xian was at the tribulation transcendence stage, he still felt a chill from the bottom of his heart. This kind of chill didn't come from his body but from his soul. Rumble! A ray of light at dawn illuminated the endless void. A resplendent path of light lay beneath Yi Xian's feet. Behind him, strange and horrifying cries could be heard. When the nether soldiers pass through, the living shall retreat. The voice was emotionless, and it gave off a chill that came from the soul. It was as if the voice had always existed in the distant past, as if it was a will formed from the laws of the world. Ta-ta-ta. The sound of horse hooves could be heard as a sinister wind rumbled. Just as Yi Xian was slightly surprised, he saw a magnificent army of thousands of men and horses appear behind him. They were galloping along the resplendent path of light. Black spears, black iron warhorses, and a vast army of Yin soldiers. These were the things that Yi Xian saw. Yi Xian's expression didn't change. His body slightly tilted to the side and directly made way for these strange things to pass by him on horseback. Yi Xian narrowed his eyes, a hint of surprise flashing through his eyes. What did he see? Among the vast army of ghost soldiers, countless pale souls were bound by chains. Clearly, the cries and wails from before had come from these souls. The soul of a person after death? Yi Xian muttered to himself. As a cultivator in the tribulation stage, Yi Xian could feel that the vast army of Yin soldiers had no consciousness at all. It was as if they were machines that carried out orders and had been maintaining the operation of hell since ancient times. Moreover, what surprised Yi Xian the most was that the eyes of the Yin souls imprisoned in chains were extremely dull. Other than numb crying and wailing, there was no trace of human emotion at all. When a person's soul leaves their body after death, could it be that even their memories from when they were alive no longer exist? Yi Xian muttered in his sleep, a gloomy expression appearing in his eyes. If that was the case, even if he found Yi Ling-er's soul, how could he recover her memories? While Yi Xian was pondering, the vast army of Yin soldiers sped past him. However, it was also at this moment that Yi Xian caught a glimpse of a headless ghost general passing by him. It paused for a moment before continuing to rush towards the depths of hell. Something strange. Yi Xian narrowed his eyes and chased after the headless ghost general. He even leaped onto the headless ghost general's warhorse and followed the army of Yin soldiers. Heaven and earth inverted returned to the origin. Yi Xian pointed a finger at the headless ghost general. A spot of blood-red light appeared in the void. The headless ghost general's body suddenly shook and the yin qi around it suddenly exploded, drowning Yi Xian. The technique that Yi Xian used was a soul-searching technique. It could see all the memories of the target. When he realized that the headless ghost general seemed to be different from the other Yin soldiers, he was afraid that the headless ghost general might have developed some consciousness. How dare you? All of a sudden, before Yi Xian could search the headless ghost general's memories, there was an explosion in the endless heaven and earth. A Yin thunder suddenly appeared above Yi Xian's head and violently struck down on him. Bang! The headless ghost general exploded into smoke, and Yi Xian's body was suddenly sent flying. The terrifying Yin thunder and lightning continued to wreak havoc on his body, making him feel as if his soul was being torn apart. The law of heaven and earth? Yi Xian's eyes were cold and his voice was ruthless and low. He suddenly exploded with a majestic blood-red light, and directly turned the Yin thunder into smoke. He looked at the void in all directions and his eyes were filled with hostility. Obviously, Yi Xian wanted to search the headless ghost general's memories, and directly violated the law of heaven and earth's bottom line. It even formed a Yin thunder and stopped him. If the Yin thunder formed by the law of heaven and earth is so powerful, wouldn't the law of six paths be even more terrifying? Yi Xian's face was gloomy as he naturally thought of this matter. Fortunately, after the Yin thunder disappeared, there was no more movement in the heaven and earth. Yi Xian's eyes were deep and he did not take any drastic actions. He could only take one step at a time and follow behind the vast army of Yin soldiers. He wanted to see what kind of existence was in the depths of the hell of Yama. The Yin wind whistled and the horses' hooves thundered. In the hell of Yama, there seemed to be no concept of time. Yixian did not know how long he walked with the vast army of Yin soldiers. When Yixian's patience was almost worn out, a towering city appeared in front of his eyes. Fengdu City? Yixian said in surprise. There was a city gate mottled with blood and pitch-black walls. On top of the city gate hung a black plaque with the words, Fengdu City, written on it. However, this was not what surprised Yixian the most. What surprised him the most was that the city was extremely vast. In all directions of the void, there were countless Yin soldiers escorting dead souls into Fengdu City. Soon Yixian followed the vast army of Yin soldiers to the city gate. There was a blood-red stone tablet on both sides of the city gate with 8 bloody words written on it. The dead rest in peace, the living stay away. These 8 words were written with iron and silver hooks, making people feel as if their souls were about to be sucked in at a glance. Even Yixian's tribulation passing stage primordial spirit felt a little dizzy. The power of heaven and earth really can't be underestimated. Yixian focused his mind and calmed his qi. He let out a sigh of admiration, but there was an extremely hot look in his eyes. Yixian was not afraid. He also believed that his future would not stop at the tribulation passing stage. When he reached the peak, even the laws of heaven and earth would be trampled under his feet. The dead souls entered the city and the Yin soldiers passed through. Yixian restrained his aura to the extreme and finally entered Fengdu City. Fengdu City. Ancient buildings, pavilions, and palaces rose from the ground. Yixian felt as if he had traveled through time and returned to ancient times. However, there were no living people in this city. Countless dead souls floated in the city. The gloomy ghost aura filled the void. The vast army of Yin soldiers had just entered the city when they strangely dissipated. There was only a path of Yin light that led to the depths of the city. It was unknown where the end of the path was. Yixian narrowed his eyes and strolled along the path of Yin light into the city. From time to time, dead souls would step on the path of Yin light and pass by him. However, these dead souls were lifeless and did not have any human emotions at all. Time passed very quickly. As Yixian gradually walked towards the center of the city, the number of dead souls on the path gradually increased. In the center of the city there were 6 doors that were constantly rotating, releasing an ancient aura as if they had stood there for countless years. 6 paths of reincarnation? Yixian's footsteps came to an abrupt halt, and his expression gradually became heavy. This was because he saw the dead souls on the path step into the 6 doors in a daze. Their bodies gradually turned into mist until they disappeared into the 6 doors. Obviously, this was the so-called reincarnation. At this moment, Yixian felt a great sense of urgency. He did not know if he had come too late. If Yi Ling Er's soul had already been reincarnated, then wouldn't his efforts have been in vain? Chapter 103. Just as Yixian was feeling vexed, suddenly, a strange sound entered his ears, causing him to look towards the source of the sound. A dark soul as black as ink was lurking on both sides of the light path. As soon as a departed soul stepped onto the light path, the dark soul suddenly transformed into a ferocious bloody mouth and swallowed the departed soul. Then it quickly fled into the distance, as if it was afraid of being discovered by some existence. Looking at this scene, Yixian was startled. Then a trace of ecstasy appeared in his eyes. He directly left the light path and transformed into a bloody stream of light as he chased after the dark soul. The dark wind exploded and the void trembled. The dark soul seemed to feel that someone was chasing after him. This caused his aura to become chaotic and he desperately fled forward. Do you think you can escape? Suddenly, Yixian blocked in front of the dark soul. When he struck out with his palm, a surging bloody light erupted and directly slapped the dark soul to the ground. Living person. How can there be living people in hell? The dark soul was ghastly. When he raised his eyes and saw Yixian, he let out a cry of horror. As expected, you have your own consciousness. Yixian's eyes lit up. His originally anxious mood immediately eased. Tell me, who are you? Why are you different from other departed souls? Why do you have your own consciousness? Yixian strolled forward until he came to the dark soul's side. The bloody light in his eyes was so dense that it was almost tangible, causing the dark soul to tremble to the extreme. Exalted Immortal. My name is Dark Crow. Exalted Immortal, please spare my life. Looking at the terrifying bloody light around Yixian, the dark soul trembled and begged for mercy. Don't be afraid. I won't hurt you. I just want to ask you a few questions. Yixian revealed a smile. The bloody light around him quickly retracted, causing the dark crow to gradually calm down. Exalted Immortal, this is not the place to talk. Let's find another place to talk. The dark crow sensed that Yixian had no intention of harming him. He hurriedly bowed to Yixian and looked around with fear. Then he quickly led the way for Yixian. Soon after, under the dark crow's guidance, the two of them appeared in a remote pavilion in Necropolis. It wasn't until they entered the pavilion that the dark crow's panicked emotions calmed down. You're scared. What are you scared of? Although the dark crow didn't have a physical body, Yixian could sense his panic, which prompted him to ask, Exalted Immortal, you may not know this, but the laws of Yama are dense. Previously, when I swallowed the souls of the dead, I had to risk my life to succeed. If the laws of heaven and earth were to detect it, my soul would be scattered and I would die. The dark crow said with lingering fear. Yixian nodded after hearing the dark crow's explanation. Clearly, the dark crow was telling the truth. When he had probed the headless ghost general before, the laws of the world had punished him. Yixian softly asked, Tell me, why do you want to devour souls and what kind of existence are you? As Yixian asked, the dark crow slowly explained his origins and gave Yixian an introduction to the situation in Fengdu City. According to the dark crow, he didn't know who he was when he was alive. When he gained consciousness, he appeared in Necropolis. At first, he wandered aimlessly, but as the days passed, he was horrified to find that his body was constantly being pulled by the six paths as if it wanted to devour him. By chance, the dark crow found that devouring souls could stabilize his soul, and even break free from the pull of the six paths of reincarnation. However, devouring souls was extremely dangerous, and could cause his soul to scatter at any time. In order to survive, the dark crow would take risks every once in a while, resulting in the scene that Yixian saw earlier. From the dark crow's narration, Yixian also learned that the dark crow was not an exception. There were many existences like the dark crow hiding in Necropolis. However, the survival of these souls with consciousness was worrying. Every once in a while, they would be destroyed by the laws of heaven and earth. After understanding the situation, a light flashed in Yixian's eyes as if he was weighing something. He didn't say anything for a long time, causing the dark crow to become nervous. From time to time, he would steal glances at Yixian from the corner of his eyes. Have you seen this person before? Yixian pointed with his finger and Yi Ling-er's appearance appeared in the air. Upper Immortal, please don't blame me. I have never seen this person. Moreover, Necropolis is too big. Every day there are so many souls entering here. If you really want to find her, I'm afraid. The dark crow hesitated. Hearing the dark crow's answer, Yixian's eyes were filled with disappointment. This also made the dark crow's mind move. He turned his eyes slightly and carefully probed. Although I have never seen this person, I have a way to find her whereabouts. However, this method is extremely dangerous. I don't know if you... Yixian narrowed his eyes and looked indifferently at the dark crow. He said, What method? Upper Immortal, this hell of Yama was once under the control of immortals and gods. Although they died of old age, the Book of Life and Death in Yama Palace is intact. If you can obtain this item, it will be easy to find this person. Book of Life and Death. Yixian murmured to himself. He looked at the soul with a strange expression. Previously, the dark crow clearly said that he had no memory of his life. How did he know that in those distant years, Hell of Yama was under the control of immortals and gods? Obviously, the dark crow was lying. Perhaps feeling that Yixian's gaze was not right, the dark crow held his breath and quickly explained, Upper Immortal, please don't blame me. This little one only saw some ancient books in Fengdu City that mention this. As for whether the Book of Life and Death exists or not, this little one doesn't know the details. It's fine. If you can help me, why would I doubt you? Yixian smiled gently. However, a ray of bloody light flashed in his eyes and then quietly disappeared. Looking at the smile on Yixian's face, the dark crow let out a sigh of relief. He struck while the iron was hot and urged, Upper Immortal, if you obtain the Book of Life and Death, Perhaps you can control the sixth Tao of reincarnation. At that time, in this huge Fengdu city, you will be the supreme existence. Looking at the dark crow's eager expression, Yi Xian's smile became even more amiable. He affectionately patted the dark crow's shoulder and said, "You are very good. If I can obtain the Book of Life and Death, I will certainly not mistreat you." This little one doesn't dare to take credit. As long as Upper Immortal can control the sixth Tao of reincarnation after obtaining the Book of Life and Death, this little one's life will not be in danger. This is already very satisfying. The dark crow knelt on the ground and continuously kowtowed to Yi Xian in gratitude. A wisp of a cold smile appeared on the corner of Yi Xian's mouth before disappearing without a trace. He even intimately helped the dark crow up and said, "Tell me, where is the Book of Life and Death, and how should I obtain it?" Legend has it that the Book of Life and Death is on the table in Yanluo Dian. However, there is a grand sealing formation in Yanluo Dian. If you want to enter, you must break the seal. I wonder if Upper Immortal? The dark crow wanted to say something but hesitated. "You lead the way. I also want to see what Yanluo Dian looks like." The smile on Yi Xian's face remained the same from beginning to end. It could be said that both of them had their own ulterior motives. However, this layer of paper had not been pierced through yet. The dark crow's eyes lowered as a glint of darkness flashed in his eyes. When he lifted his head again, he became even more respectful towards Yi Xian. "Upper Immortal, please follow me." Following the dark crow's lead, the two directly left the pavilion and headed towards the center of Fengdu City. Chapter 104. An Ancient Legend. The world was divided into 3 realms. The first was the celestial court, the second was the human world, and the third was the underworld. In the underworld there were the 10 kings of hell, the oxhead and horseface, the black and white impermanence, and the terrifying 18 levels of hell. Yi Xian did not know if the legend was true, but he knew that he had never seen the 10 kings of hell, the oxhead and horseface, let alone the 18 levels of hell. At this moment, what appeared before Yi Xian's eyes was an extremely dilapidated black palace. The mottled walls were engraved with traces of the passage of time, and 2 malevolent ghosts were carved on the blood-colored copper door, giving off a sinister and terrifying feeling. A dark golden plaque hung above the door beam, and 3 words were written on it: King of Hell's Hall. Great Immortal, it is said that the Book of Life and Death is in the King of Hell's Hall, but if you want to enter, you have to break the seal. The dark crow reminded. Yi Xian did not answer. Instead, he strolled to the front of the King of Hell's Hall. When he opened and closed his eyes, a blood-red light flashed in his eyes. He raised his hand and slammed it on the door of the palace. Bang! The heaven and earth shook and blood spurted out. An extremely terrifying scene appeared. Roar! It shook the heaven and earth, and the roar shattered the mountains and rivers. The 2 evil spirits carved on the door came to life at this moment. A monstrous ghost fog rose around them, and they violently pounced on Yi Xian. Slash! Yi Xian's face was expressionless. A pair of sword fingers pierced through the sky, and 100 feet long blood sword appeared. With an unparalleled power, it directly chopped down on the 2 evil spirits. At the same time, the dark crow, who was originally following behind Yi Xian, suddenly laughed wildly. Under Yi Xian's cold gaze, it turned into a soul shadow and instantly entered the King of Hell's Hall. Haha. Junior, thank you for blocking these 2 evil spirits for me. When I get the Book of Life and Death, I will definitely turn you into an evil spirit servant to repay you. Roar! When the dark crow broke into the Yama Palace, the 2 evil spirits let out ferocious roars. The ghostly fog around them grew thicker, and they pounced on Yi Xian without fear of death. Soul-extinguishing finger. A speck of blood-red light appeared on Yi Xian's fingertip. As if it could pierce through the void of time, it instantly turned the 2 evil spirits into black smoke. It also caused the world to suddenly quiet down. A cruel sneer appeared on Yi Xian's lips. He strolled into the Yama Palace unhurriedly, as though the dark crow's actions had not angered him at all. From start to finish, Yi Xian didn't trust the dark crow at all. He already knew that the dark crow was only using him to enter the Yama temple. However, none of this mattered. To Yi Xian, the dark crow's life was already in his hands. The dark crow was still too inexperienced to scheme against him. After passing through the dark passageway, A ray of light rose in front of him. When Yixian walked out of the passageway, he saw a majestic and luxurious palace. The 99 black jade stairs gave off a mysterious glow. At the end of the stairs, a black wooden table appeared. The dark crow was holding a black jade book and laughing maniacally. Haha, it's been 3,000 years, a full 3,000 years. I didn't expect the book of life and death to return to my hands again. The dark crow roared excitedly. The dark light around him continued to surge, causing the entire Yama palace to shake violently as if it would collapse at any time. Suddenly, the dark crow stopped laughing and turned to look at Yixian. The yin-chi around him changed strangely and he actually turned into a human. He had sword-like eyebrows, starry eyes, fair skin, and a head of black hair. The dark crow was wearing a flood dragon robe and a skull crown. His face was dignified. He held the book of life and death and looked down at Yixian, who was below the black jade stairs. There was a look of scrutiny in his eyes. Should I call you the dark crow or Yama? Yixian said calmly with his hands behind his back. Junior, although I don't know how you entered the Yama hell, I can spare your life today since you helped me retrieve the book of life and death. However, from now on, you are my servant and you will do as I command, the dark crow said majestically. Ha! Yixian laughed. He really laughed, but it was a contemptuous laugh. The dark crow narrowed his eyes and his face gradually darkened. Junior, what are you laughing at? The dark crow said coldly. Tap tap tap. Like the beating of war drums and the wailing of thousands of blood spirits, Yixian's body bloomed with a Tongtian blood-red light as he strolled toward the dark crow. There were 99 steps of the black jade stairs. With each step Yixian took, thousands of blood shadows roared around Yixian. The thick bloody evil aura filled the entire Yama palace and made Yixian look terrifying. Looking at this scene, the dark crow's expression changed greatly. He unconsciously retreated and quickly activated the book of life and death. A turbid light beam shrouded him and blocked the terrifying power that Yixian released. Dong! Yixian finally walked in front of the dark crow. When he opened and closed his eyes, he looked at the dark crow with an indifferent and emotionless expression, as if he was looking at an ant. Tribulation stage? How is this possible? The dark crow's eyes followed closely and his voice trembled slightly. He finally discovered a terrifying fact. The power that the young man in front of him displayed already had a trace of immortal spirit. This was a sign that he was about to become an immortal. No, impossible. There is no spiritual energy in the world. How did you reach the tribulation passing stage? The dark crow roared in horror. If it wasn't for the book of life and death, he would have fled in panic. I will give you two choices. You can either submit to me or perish. Yixian said casually with his hands behind his back. Haha. Looking at Yixian's fearless appearance, the dark crow woke up from his shock and laughed coldly. Junior, have you heard that if the king of hell wants you dead at midnight, who dares to keep you alive until dawn? If not for the book of life and death, I would not be your opponent. But now that I have the book of life and death, killing you is as easy as crushing an ant. Oh. You can try. Yixian smiled faintly. There was an indescribable strangeness in his eyes. You are courting death. The dark crow roared. The book of life and death left his hand and turned into a stone book that was hundreds of feet tall. It emitted endless dark light and pressed down on Yixian. Junior, the book of life and death is a spiritual object formed by the laws of heaven and earth. Even if you are at the tribulation stage, you will definitely die under the book of life and death. The dark crow laughed maniacally, but before he could finish laughing, what happened next caused him to be completely dumbfounded. His body began to tremble uncontrollably. Boom! Standing upright, the blood light of the Tongtian stood. In the endless void, the souls of the dead were crying and the evil spirits were howling miserably. Streaks of bloodlight burst out from Yixian's body. When he punched out, the fist radiance of the Tongtian's fist surged out violently and directly blew away the book of life and death. Chapter 105. Buzz. The void exploded, and the heavens and the earth shook. Without waiting for the dark crow to react, Yixian took a step forward and waved his hand. The 300-meter-long book of life and death instantly transformed into a black jade book, and was sucked into Yixian's hand. It was cold to the touch and his soul was throbbing. This was what Yixian felt at the moment. When the blood light evaporated from Yixian's hand, the life and death book that had been in a riot gradually calmed down and turned into an ordinary stone book without any energy fluctuation. How is this possible? The dark crow roared in horror. He was completely confused and could not believe what he had seen. Dong! Yixian took a step forward, causing the ground to explode. Holding the book of life and death in his hands, he instantly appeared in front of the dark crow. When he struck out with his palm, he directly slapped the dark crow to the ground, and his wide foot suddenly stomped on the dark crow's face. Why? The life and death book is obviously formed by heaven and earth and contains incredible power. Why is it like this? The dark crow roared crazily as he was stepped on by Yixian. Obviously, he could not accept this fact. You are really ignorant. Yixian sneered and stroked the life and death book in his hand. A hint of excitement appeared in his eyes and then disappeared quietly. You are just a soul and your cultivation is extremely weak. How can the life and death book display its power in your hands? Yixian said bluntly. Hearing Yixian's words, the dark crow instantly realized that he had made a very serious mistake. He was just a soul now and had lost his cultivation. He was like a child. Even if he had a sharp steel knife in his hand, how could he fight against an adult? Unfortunately, it was too late for the dark crow to understand this. His life had already fallen into Yixian's hands, and he might die in the next moment. What do you want? The dark crow said in a trembling voice. You only have two choices in front of me. You can either submit to me or die with your body and soul destroyed. Yixian said coldly. Impossible. The dark crow didn't even think about it and angrily refused. Although the dark crow was a soul and lacked most of his memories, he knew who he was when he was alive. In the distant past, he was known as the King Yanluo of Hell, and he was the ruler of the Eastern Underworld. How could he possibly submit to a junior of the future? Even though Yixian had stepped on him, the dark crow had his own pride and refused to bow down to Yixian. He roared, Junior, even if you are in the crossing calamity stage, I am the King of Hell of the East. Don't even think about making me submit to you. King Yanluo? Yixian sneered, his eyes full of contempt. A person's greatest sin is ignorance. Not to mention that you're just a mere soul now. Even if you were alive, you were just a dejected immortal. As Yixian spoke to hear, his voice paused for a moment. His gaze towards the dark crow became even more strange as he said, Do you know the true meaning of the words King Yama? I. The dark crow said in a trembling voice, but it swallowed the words that were about to come out of its mouth. Its entire body became silent. How could the dark crow not understand the meaning of the words Yama King? Yama King was one of the kings of hell. It was said that in the earthly immortal realm, Yama King controlled the 6 paths of reincarnation and was revered by all living things. As for the world Yixian was in, it was just an abandoned land. The laws of heaven and earth were incomplete, and there was basically no trace of spiritual energy. Even the Yama Hell that he was in right now was only constructed by the laws of the heavens for the reincarnation of the dead. A mere soul dared to use the name of Yama King. How could Yixian not find it ridiculous? Seeing the dark crow speechless, Yixian slowly shook his head and said with a cruel smile, I have given you a chance, but you don't know how to cherish it. Don't blame me. A terrifying bloody light bloomed in Yixian's palm. It seemed that Yixian would kill the dark crow in the next moment. Don't kill me. I can recognize you as my master, but you have to promise me one thing. When death approached, the dark crow finally felt fear. He really didn't want to die. After all, he had struggled at death's door for so many years in hopes of leaving this damned place. How could he be willing to die in the hands of Yixian? Condition? Yixian sneered. Even your life is mine. Do you think you are qualified to negotiate with me? Now tell me how to find the person I want to find through the Book of Life and Death. And you said before that if I get the Book of Life and Death, I can control the 6 paths of reincarnation and control the entire Yama Hell. Is this true? Yixian asked in a low voice. He moved his foot away from the dark crow's face, allowing him to quickly stand up. However, the yin energy around him fluctuated slightly. It was clear that he found it difficult to accept the fact that he had become Yixian's servant. The Book of Life and Death is formed from a worldly spirit. It records the existence of every soul in Fengdu. As long as you merge your divine sense into the book, you will naturally be able to find the other person's location. The dark crow bowed and continued. As for being able to control the Yama hell after obtaining the book of life and death, this is only a lie. The life and death of all things are determined by the heavens. The 6 paths of reincarnation are also in charge of the reincarnation of souls. Outside of the true Yama king of the earth immortal world, no one has ever heard of this. After hearing the dark crow's explanation, Yixian narrowed his eyes and kept on stroking the book of life and death in his hand. A thoughtful glint flashed through his eyes as he sank into contemplation. Ever since Yixian entered the Yama hell and saw the boundless souls of the dead, an extremely bold idea arose in his mind. After the death of mortals, their souls would enter this place. If he could control the Yama hell, it would be of great benefit to him. However, after listening to the dark crow's explanation, it seemed that this was simply a delusion. Is it really impossible? Yixian muttered to himself. Hearing Yixian's words, the dark crow's expression changed. He did not expect Yixian to be so ambitious that he actually wanted to control the Yama hell. A mocking look appeared in the dark crow's eyes. This is simply a fantasy. Since the birth of the Yama hell, the 6 paths of reincarnation have always been operating. Although the 6 paths of reincarnation cannot be compared with the 6 paths of reincarnation in the earth immortal world, it is also filled with the power of the 6 paths of reincarnation. Even if you are a true immortal, you cannot resist the power of the 6 paths of reincarnation. The dark crow spoke respectfully, but his words contained a hint of mockery. Obviously, he sneered at Yixian's ambition. A fantasy story? How do you know it won't work if you don't try? Yixian narrowed his eyes. A hint of madness flashed through his eyes and a strange smile appeared on his face. When the dark crow saw the smile on Yixian's face, he could not help but shudder. He unconsciously stepped back as if there was a voice in the unseen world telling him that the person in front of him would bring about an extremely terrible change to the Yama hell. You must not act recklessly. The 6 paths of reincarnation are not something that can be controlled by human strength. The dark crow said in horror. His illusory body trembled unconsciously. Obviously, he was frightened by Yixian's words. Chapter 106. Others might not know how terrifying the 6th Tao of reincarnation was, but how could the dark crow not know? The 6th Tao of law, destruction of life. This was not just a saying. If the terrifying power contained within were to erupt, the entire Yama hell would collapse. At that time, not only would Yixian die, but he would also be implicated. Unfortunately, Yixian did not take the dark crow's advice to heart. Since he had such an idea, he naturally had a certain level of confidence. Buzz! Yixian's divine sense entered the book of life and death. He saw the book of life and death flip rapidly. Information poured into Yixian's sea of consciousness like a tide. The scene of the entire Fengdu city was reflected in his mind. Found it! After dozens of breaths, Yixian opened his eyes. A trace of joy appeared on his face. He held the book of life and death and directly walked out of the Yama palace. He also let the dark crow quickly follow. East gate of Fengdu city. Yi Ling-er's soul shadow was illusory. She hugged her knees and leaned against a corner of the wall. Her eyes were dull and lifeless as she stared blankly at the ground below her feet, giving off a delicate and pitiful feeling. Buzz! When Yixian appeared in front of Yi Ling-er, he did not attract any attention from her. Yixian saw his little sister's appearance and frowned slightly. Dark Crow, how do I recover her memories? Yixian asked in a low voice. The Book of Life and Death is a spiritual item of heaven and earth. Not only can it exterminate souls, but it can also recover their memories. As long as you activate this item, you can wake her up, the Dark Crow respectfully said. Hearing the Dark Crow's reminder, Yixian slowly nodded. The vast blood energy in his body poured into the Book of Life and Death, causing the book-seen light to blaze. It instantly enveloped Yi Ling-er, causing her dull face to distort as if she was experiencing some kind of pain. Ah! Suddenly Yi Ling-er let out a scream. Her dull eyes gradually regained their spirit. Extreme fear appeared in her eyes. Little sister, don't be afraid, Yixian said softly. Brother. When Yi Ling-er saw Yixian in front of her, she was completely stunned. Then, her face showed an expression of disbelief. She clearly remembered that at the airport in Jingdu, she was killed by a laser weapon that pierced through her heart. After that, she completely lost consciousness. Could it be that she was still alive? Didn't I die? Where is this place? Yi Ling-er's face was perplexed. When she saw the scene of Fengdu City, she became even more perplexed. According to common sense, you are indeed dead. This is the underworld, a place where people go after death. Yi Xian sighed and helped his little sister up from the ground. Since I'm already dead, brother, why are you here? Could it be? Looking at the wandering souls in Fengdu City and Yi Xian in front of him, Yi Ling-er's voice was choked with sobs. His face was filled with misery. He believed that Yi Xian was like him and had also become a soul. Alright, don't be silly. Your brother is not dead yet. This time I came to the underworld to bring you back to the human world, Yi Xian said with a smile. Brothers, is this true? Looking at the smile on Yi Xian's face, Yi Ling-er bit her lips tightly. She looked at Yi Xian with an extremely complicated expression. Yi Ling-er knew that her brother was very mysterious and had power that ordinary people could not reach. However, she had never thought that Yi Xian would have the ability to bring her back to life. If she had not seen Yi Xian with her own eyes, she would not have believed such a fantasy. Alright, little sister. You are now just a soul. Temporarily enter the book of life and death. I will bring you back to the human world. Without waiting for Yi Ling-er to react, Yi Xian directly activated the book of life and death, and sucked his little sister's soul into it. When the dark crow saw this scene, his expression changed greatly. He immediately blocked in front of Yi Xian. Master, you cannot bring her out of the underworld, the dark crow said with a trembling voice. Yi Xian frowned and said, why? The cycle of life and death is determined by the heavens. This cannot be changed at all. If Master reverses yin and yang and brings the dead soul back to the human world, the 6 paths of reincarnation will definitely mercilessly suppress you, the dark crow explained anxiously. Hearing the dark crow's words, Yi Xian was stunned. He did not think that he was lying. After all, before he came to the underworld, Yuan Ling had told him about this. But I must bring her back to the human world. Yi Xian was silent for a long time. His eyes looked deeply at the dark crow. No, this is absolutely not possible. Unless Master does not even care about your own life. The dark crow roared in shock. He unconsciously stepped back because he found that an extremely terrifying bloody light had risen around Yi Xian's body. It was as if he was about to do something bad. Then I want to see how powerful the 6 paths of reincarnation is and whether or not it can stop me. Yi Xian's bloody light was chaotic. When he opened and closed his eyes, bloody lightning constantly flashed in his eyes. The surrounding void rumbled and exploded. Open for me. His roar shattered mountains and rivers. Heaven and earth shook. As Yi Xian punched out, a crack was directly blasted open in the endless void. A door to the human world also appeared in the void. Madman, you madman. Since you want to die, don't drag me down with you. Looking at this scene, the dark crow screamed in horror. He directly turned into a dark light and fled in panic. The trembling aura around the dark crow was proof of the extent of his fear. Suddenly, a terrifying thing happened. Whoosh! Like a sea of blood and the yellow river. The wailing of billions of dead souls reverberated in the underworld. The 6 paths of reincarnation rose in the center of Fengdu City. The dim and turbid light seemed to illuminate the universe. The rotation of heaven and earth. The 6 paths of reincarnation is boundless. The vast and merciless heavenly Tao thundered. This voice seemed to cross the barrier of time and space and appeared in the underworld. Rumble. The 6 paths of reincarnation crossed the void. The vast and invincible power directly crushed the gate of the human world opened by Yi Xian into ashes. The slowly rotating power of the Dharma seemed to crush the universe. Those who disturb yin and yang shall be killed. The heavenly Tao was merciless and the Dharma was strangling. The 6 paths of reincarnation rotated endlessly. Chains of order extended from the 6 paths of reincarnation and entangled Yi Xian with boundless and terrifying power. Yi Xian had never seen such a terrifying power. Even though he was in the crossing calamity stage, a great fear of life and death rose from the bottom of his heart. This feeling made Yi Xian's expression turn solemn. Extreme madness appeared in his eyes. How long has it been? 1 year or 2 years? When Yixian stepped into the crossing calamity stage, he no longer felt the invasion of death. The 4 years of life in the Blood Sea made him struggle in the face of death. He had not experienced this feeling for a long time. When this feeling appeared in his heart again, it made Yixian's blood boil completely. Monstrous fighting spirit appeared in his eyes. Undying celestial dipper. The sky exploded and the stars were shattered. Yixian sublimated to the extreme. His crossing calamity stage cultivation was fully revealed. The bloodlight of the Tong Tian illuminated the entire Fengdu city. He also violently punched the 6 paths of reincarnation. Chapter 107. Bang! 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 The fist radiance was like a star, and the blood radiance was like a river of stars. Yixian's fists danced around the universe, and the chains of order collapsed under his fists. However, the 6 paths gate stood firm in the void, and a large number of chains of 6 paths shot out as if there was no end to them, wrapping around Yixian. The ground caved in for thousands of miles and the void cracked. Fengdu City was in ruins. Yixian didn't know how many punches he had thrown, but the 6 paths gate in front of him didn't decrease in number, and his blood and qi were rapidly depleting. Bang! Suddenly, a chain of order shattered Yixian's protective blood radiance. The terrifying power of the law of 6 paths directly invaded his body, causing him to lose his balance and stagger backward. Thousands of miles away, the dark crow's face was filled with horror, and his eyes were filled with resentment. This idiot, does he really think he can fight against the law of 6 paths? High in the sky in the void, Yixian's face was pale. A large number of chains of 6 paths had already wrapped around him, and terrifying blood scars appeared all over his body. From Yixian's hideous and terrifying face, one could tell how much pain he was in at this moment. Rumble! Suddenly Yixian sat cross-legged, and his hideous and terrifying face gradually calmed down. When he opened his eyes, the blood-red lightning had already disappeared, and was replaced by a strange black lightning. The cool breeze blew, causing Yixian's gray hair to flutter in the wind. The blood radiance around him gradually disappeared, and a pitch-black and strange radiance slowly rose around him. God illuminates the sun and moon. Demons create chaos. Great demon fist creates chaos in heaven and earth. Who in this world dares to claim supremacy, obscure and indescribable? The heavens were in turmoil. Yixian was slowly reciting sutras, and the sound of the 1,000 demons chanting came from the endless void. This chanting sound was strange and inexplicable, as if it had crossed the barrier of time and space to come to this world. It made people's souls tremble when they heard it. I have a fist called the Great Demon. Rumble! Monstrous demonic light pierced through the past and present. When Yixian opened his eyes, his body began to tremble. The 6 chains wrapped around him gradually began to break apart. Bang! The 6 chains shattered in all directions. Yixian finally stood up. His entire body was shrouded in a pitch-black demonic light, making it impossible to see his expression. He slowly raised his right fist, and the fist aura that seemed to have transcended the ages was blooming with unprecedented power. Great Devil Fist. It was as if the stars had exploded, as if the heavens and earth were collapsing. When Yixian punched out, the endless void turned into dust and smoke, and the heaven-shaking demonic fist violently smashed towards the 6 doors. Bang bang bang! In the face of Yixian's punch, the door of 6 paths cracked and swayed violently in the void, as if it would collapse at any moment. Puff! A mouthful of blood spurted out from Yixian's mouth. The demonic light around him was extremely weak, and his face was extremely pale. This was because the Great Devil Fist was a supreme fist technique from the forbidden chapter of the Immortal scripture. It was extremely difficult for him to perform it with his cultivation at the crossing calamity stage. At this moment his body was already injured because of performing this fist technique. Rumble! The door of 6 paths cracked, but it eventually stabilized and did not disappear in the void. Instead, an extremely violent emotion bloomed from the door of 6 paths. Buzz. The door of 6 paths rotated continuously. At this moment, an extremely terrifying change was taking place. After a dozen breaths, the door of 6 paths merged together, forming a terrifying door of 6 paths, heaven-defying Dai. The heavenly Tao was emotionless, and its voice was like the netherworld. Before Yixian could react, an extremely terrifying pulling force suddenly exerted on his body and directly swallowed him into the door of six paths pain. Excruciating pain, a pain worse than death. This was what Yixian was feeling at this moment. This pain was not only exerted on Yixian's body, but also directly reflected on his soul. Yixian's consciousness was blurring, and his primordial spirit was weakening. It was as if his body and soul would be destroyed at any time. The terrifying six paths of Dharma constantly destroyed Yixian's body, causing his body to be covered in blood, and a large amount of death qi permeated around him. Yixian's consciousness was blurred, but he struggled to hold on. Yixian bit the tip of his tongue and forced himself to stay alert. He kept telling himself that he could not die yet, and that he still had many things to do. He had not ascended to the 9 heavens, and he had not overlooked all living beings. How could he die under the 6 paths of Dharma? I, Yixian, was born as a human, and I have to swim against the current. Even if the heavens and earth punish me, I will pierce through the heavens and crush the earth. Yixian roared ferociously in the door of 6 paths. His mournful and unwilling voice seemed to be able to shake the heavens and earth. Heaven-destroying halberd. When Yixian roared out, the center of his brows glowed. The heavenly punishing halberd shot out and transformed into a 3,000-meter-long blood halberd that enveloped his body, protecting his last bit of life force. He even wanted to bring him out of the 6 heavenly gates. You can't leave. Before the heaven-destroying halberd could bring Yixian away, Yixian roared, and his eyes were filled with madness. Today, I am already powerless against the incomplete 6 paths of Dharma. If I face the immortals in the future, where can I escape to? As a furnace I can bury the heavens and earth. Devour. Yixian had gone completely crazy. He sat cross-legged in the middle of the 6 paths of heaven gate with the heavenly punishing halberd as his protector. His entire body emitted an aura that could break the heavens and destroy the earth. He even opened his mouth wide and swallowed all of the power of laws within the 6 paths of heaven gate into his body. Poof! 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 Yixian's crazy actions caused his body to explode. The 6 paths of Dharma power wreaked havoc in his body, causing him to be bathed in blood. It was a tragic sight. Devour the heavens and earth. Refine my demonic body. Yixian seemed to have forgotten the pain in his body. He roared furiously and formed a terrifying demonic seal with his palms. He forcibly refined the 6 paths of Dharma power in his body. Ruthless. Ruthless. Extremely ruthless. Some people had always thought that Yixian was ruthless to his enemies. However, they did not know that Yixian was truly ruthless to himself. It was not a big deal for a person to be ruthless to his enemies. However, being ruthless to himself was the most terrifying thing. There was no doubt that Yixian was this kind of person. It was also because Yixian was ruthless to himself that he was able to survive in the Bloodsea battlefield in just 4 years and reach the crossing calamity stage. Today Yixian finally revealed his true nature. He would never allow himself to be a failure. Not only did he want to devour the 6 paths of Dharma power, he also wanted to use the 6 paths of Dharma power to improve his supreme cultivation. Refining. Refining the 6 paths of Dharma power in his body in a frenzy. Yixian's body went from being destroyed to being repaired and then back to being destroyed again. He did not know how much time had passed as the cycle continued. Perhaps it was a day, perhaps it was a year. When the 6 paths of Dharma power in Yixian's body quieted down, a light of enlightenment flashed across Yixian's mind. His body emitted a faint yellow light at this moment. Yixian slowly opened his eyes. Did I succeed? Yixian murmured to himself. He stared blankly at his palms. When his 5 fingers closed together, the extremely terrifying 6 paths of Dharma power crackled in his palms. The vast blood qi in his body surged like the sea, causing Yixian to be unable to recover for a long time. Success. I really did succeed. Not only did I refine the 6 paths of Dharma power, but my cultivation has also advanced from the early crossing calamity stage to the mid-crossing calamity stage. Yixian took a deep breath. His body trembled unconsciously, proving the extent of his excitement. High in the sky in the void, Yixian sat cross-legged, constantly adjusting his surging emotions. Below him, more than half of Fengdu City had been annihilated. This proved how terrifying the calamity Yixian had experienced before was. I was resurrected from death. I rose from the ashes. No matter how many calamities there are in front of me, they will not stop me, Yixian. Yixian slowly opened his eyes. His voice was calm and firm. The surging emotions in his heart also calmed down at this moment. Chapter 108. The world was silent and there was no sound at all. Yixian sat cross-legged in the air with a calm expression. He looked down at the entire Fengdu city from the sky, and the 6 rays of light that bloomed around his body caused the countless souls to tremble. Master! The dark crow flew over from the distant horizon. He immediately knelt down and kowtowed towards Yixian with deep reverence in his eyes. The dark crow was a very prideful person. However, his so-called pride had disappeared in front of Yixian because he was completely convinced by Yixian's methods. What he saw today made the dark crow understand one thing. Perhaps becoming Yixian's servant was not a bad thing. Following this person might be the best choice in his life. Looking at the dark crow's respectful expression, Yixian's eyes deepened and said, "Get up, I have something to tell you." "Yes, master." The dark crow got up and bowed to the side to listen to Yixian's instructions. "This time, I have grasped the laws of 6 and have comprehended the Tao of life and death. I also plan to rebuild the Eastern Underworld. Are you willing to cut through all obstacles for me to achieve my wish?" Yixian said with dignity. "This subordinate is willing." The dark crow bowed. "Good, I will bestow you with a strand of the laws of 6. This will also ensure your safety in the Eastern Underworld." Yixian flicked his finger and a strand of the laws of 6 entered the dark crow's forehead. The dark crow was overjoyed and kept kowtowing to Yixian to express his gratitude. "I will lend you the Book of Life and Death. You will help me gather 1,000,000 soldiers and 100,000 ghost generals to rebuild the Eastern Underworld." The dark crow was surprised to see Yixian giving him the Life and Death book. He didn't expect for Yixian to trust him so much. Not only did Yixian give him a strand of the 6 Tao laws, but he also gave him the book for safekeeping. It was also because of Yixian's selfless trust that the dark crow was extremely moved. He bowed to Yixian and said resolutely, "Don't worry, master. With the 6 Tao laws and the Book of Life and Death in my hands, I will select vengeful ghosts and vengeful spirits from the billions of dead souls to be my soldiers. I will definitely create an army of hell for master. Today, I promise that when I become an immortal in the future, I will reforge your body and help you step onto the great Tao of the immortal God." Yixian understood a principle very well. Although killing could instill fear in others, the only way for a superior to control others was to use a combination of kindness and punishment. The dark crow thanks master for his great kindness. From now on, wherever master points his blade, the dark crow will advance courageously and will never betray him. After receiving Yixian's promise, the dark crow was extremely moved and was completely subdued by Yixian. Yixian's eyes were deep and a smile appeared on his face. He was very satisfied with this result. Perhaps some people would ask. Yixian gave the dark crow a strand of the 6 Tao laws and even gave him the Book of Life and Death for safekeeping. Was he not afraid of the dark crow betraying him? Betrayal? Of course Yixian thought of it. In fact, the dark crow didn't know that the 6 Tao laws given by Yixian seemed to be a reward for him, but it actually contained a bit of Yixian's divine sense. As long as the dark crow had any thoughts of betrayal, even if they were thousands of miles apart, Yixian could destroy his soul with just a thought. Trust? It didn't exist, not in this lifetime. Ever since Yixian stepped on the path of immortal cultivation, he had never trusted anyone. He only trusted himself. He seemed to trust the dark crow, but it was just a method to control people. The void trembled and the 6 Tao laws hummed. The laws of heaven and earth gradually evolved a new 6 Tao gate, allowing the souls of the dead to be reincarnated. This was the cycle of heaven and no one could change it. However, this new 6 Tao gate was no longer hostile to Yixian. After all, after refining the 6 Tao laws, he had the power of the 6 Tao laws in his body. The new 6 Tao gate naturally wouldn't suppress him. This is a jade slip for communication. If there's anything you can't solve, you can tell me. Yixian gave a jade slip to the dark crow, who received it respectfully. Rumble. The gate to the human world opened. Yixian took out a jade bottle and directly sucked Yiling, Er's soul out of the book of life and death. When he stepped out, he also entered the gate to the human world. The Dark Crow respectfully sends the Yama King back to the human world. The Dark Crow held the book of life and death and bowed to Yixian's back. In the gate to the human world, Yixian heard the Dark Crow respectfully sending him off. The corner of his mouth curved into a strange smile as he murmured, "Yama King? Yes, I like this name very much." It had been half a year since Yixian left for the underworld. It was already midsummer, and the scorching sun in the sky was roasting the earth. The surging heat waves made people feel even more anxious and unbearable. Half a year's time was neither too long nor too short. It was just that in this half a year, the world had already undergone extremely terrifying changes. There was a tsunami in Japan. A terrifying giant beast came ashore and devoured countless Japanese, causing tens of thousands of deaths. In a small country like Korea, there was a strange existence that ate people's souls and sucked their blood essence, causing extreme panic among the Koreans. In the Western countries, the legendary vampires were suspected to have appeared. There were even terrifying blood souls that wreaked havoc in the cities and devoured a large number of Western citizens, causing a bloody turmoil that had never been seen before. When these supernatural phenomena appeared all over the world initially kept it a secret. However, as these incidents appeared in large numbers, how could they hide from the eyes of the world? All the major forums on the internet, small news and newspapers reported these terrifying incidents. An extremely panicked mood spread all over the world. When these supernatural phenomena appeared, people suddenly realized that the former order of the world had collapsed. Ancient martial art ability users that they had never seen before appeared one after another in front of them, fighting these terrifying beasts and strange blood souls. Facing these blood soul beasts that had escaped from the Blood Sea battlefield, how could the so-called ancient martial art ability users be a match for them? Crushing defeat, death, crying and wailing. This was the fate of the ancient martial art ability users. The global summit was held at the United Nations. This meeting lasted for 3 days and 3 nights. The world did not know what the meeting was about, but when the leaders of the various countries returned to their countries, shocking news spread. Martial arts academies, special ability academies, Taoist temples, and Buddhist monasteries sprang up one after another in the eyes of the world. When these forces displayed their supernatural powers in front of the world was even more horrified to discover that the world they existed in was not as simple as they had imagined. The original worldview completely collapsed. The world finally realized that perhaps humanity was about to face an unprecedented calamity. From primary school to university, martial arts and special ability courses were set up. Taoism and Buddhism were added into the curriculum. From the basic theory of martial arts to the cultivation methods, they had already appeared in the academies. The military departments of various countries were also wantonly recruiting soldiers. Finally, the various countries in the world jointly released a piece of news. The world had changed. There were unknown creatures devouring humans. If humans did not want to be wiped out, they had to be armed and engage in a life and death battle with these strange creatures. When the various countries in the world finally used these things to resist these blood soul beasts, people finally realized that this was no longer the world of the past. Unfortunately, even though the technological weapons were extremely terrifying and could barely resist some blood soul beasts, the human casualties did not decrease. In the cities and towns, weapons of mass destruction could not be used at all. Not to mention whether the technological weapons could destroy these beasts. When these technological weapons erupted with terrifying power, before the blood soul beasts died, the humans would die first. Chapter 109. Xia Country. One of the strongest countries in the world was also facing an unprecedented calamity. Be it the Martial Security Bureau or the military, they were all mobilized in this calamity. Ancient martial arts clans that were hidden all over the world appeared one after another. Even the secluded Taoist and Buddhist sects appeared in the eyes of the world. Jixia College, Martial Arts Heavenly Province, Lesser Thunder Temple, Monster Exterminating League. Some of these supernatural forces were established by the country, while others were established by private individuals. However, without exception, all of them were recruiting. However, in the face of the invasion of the blood soul mutated beasts, these supernatural forces were defeated again and again. The occasional victory was just a drop in the bucket. The world fell into a bloody massacre. The former tourist attractions, the so-called famous mountains and lakes, were all sealed off by the various countries because of the existence of mutated beasts. If humans stepped into those places, the only outcome was death. When humans were defeated again and again and the blood soul mutated beasts were rampant, a piece of exciting news came. In the West Vatican City, a paladin walked out. With a golden holy spear, he killed countless blood soul mutated beasts. He followed the will of God and walked the world. The people of the West cheered and the Vatican City became the highest holy land in the West. At the same time, in the East Japan, a martial arts wanderer with a demon blade appeared. He killed countless blood soul mutated beasts and bought Japan some time to breathe. In Korea, a martial arts saintess appeared. She traveled all over Korea and saved the lives of her people. She became famous and was revered as the saintess of the Korea protector. Xia country. 100 years ago, the second strongest in the world, Yi Lingtian, walked out of the mountains. With a heavenly sword, he split mountains and rivers and destroyed countless blood soul mutated beasts. He was revered as the protector sword god by the people of Xia country. This was not the end. 100 years ago, Xiantian martial artists appeared one after another. One of them was called Ba Dao. He was the fifth strongest in the world 100 years ago. His blood river saber was incomparably domineering. He was revered as the heavenly saber god. Taoist Su Changsheng used supreme Tao to save the people of Xia country from suffering. Buddhist Mahakassapa claimed to be the reincarnation of Buddha. He saved the people of Xia country and displayed supreme Tao. He killed many blood souls and was revered by the people of Xia country. These people were resplendent and were revered by the world. However, they were only a part of it. There were even some unknown people who appeared in the land of Xia. Although they were nameless, they bloomed with dazzling brilliance. Sooner or later, they would be known by the world. The tightly shut door of the Yi family was kicked open. Dozens of ability users strode in. The leader was a man with a strong back and a bare waist. His face was ferocious and his body was covered in flames. He looked at the Yi family's father and son with greed in his eyes. Old Man Yi, our Roaring Flame Association suffered heavy casualties because of fighting against the exotic beasts. Now we need some funds from your Yi family. Are you going to give it or not? The man laughed sinisterly and strode towards the Yi family's father and son. Li Yuanlong, our Yi family treated you well in the past. Now you're betraying your master. Aren't you afraid of being laughed at by others? Yi Songhai stood up angrily and roared. Ha ha! Li Yuanlong laughed sinisterly. He looked at Yi Songhai with ridicule in his eyes and said, "The world has changed. Your Yi family is no longer the Yi family of the past. If I were you, I would tactfully take the money and not talk nonsense." You! Yi Songhai was so angry that his body was unsteady. However, he also knew that his Yi family had no ability to resist these ability users. Old Man Yi, I once gave face to Lord Azure Dragon and didn't make things difficult for your Yi family. However, after such a long time, Lord Azure Dragon led his team to fight against exotic beasts. If you can't take out the money today, I'll see who can protect your Yi family. Li Yuanlong sneered. Bang! Yi Songhao slammed the table and stood up, roaring, Li Yuanlong, don't be too complacent. Although my Yi family is not as good as before, let me tell you, my Yi family is not easy to bully. If Yi Xian returns, our Yi family will definitely rise again. Yi Xian? The existence that killed Li Huantian? At the mention of Yi Xian, Li Yuanlong's expression changed. A hint of fear flashed across his eyes, but it quickly disappeared without a trace. He sneered in disdain and said, I can't afford to offend this Mr. Yi, but so what? I heard that this person disappeared from the world half a year ago. Perhaps he was already eaten by exotic beasts. He's just a dead man. Could it be that your Yi family is counting on a dead man to stir up trouble? Ha ha! Li Yuanlong was obviously fearless and laughed wildly. He didn't put Yi Xian in his eyes at all. After all, he had endured for a long time and decided to take action today because he concluded that Yi Xian might have already died somewhere. He had deeply experienced the terror of these blood-soul exotic beasts. Chapter 110. Alright, we'll give you the money. How much do you want? Yi Songhai understood that people had to lower their heads under someone else's roof. He could only compromise with Li Yuanlong. Dad! Yi Songhai said unwillingly. Shut up. Yi Songhai gritted his teeth and reprimanded, but he was also extremely humiliated. Haha. Li Yuanlong laughed proudly. Old Yi, you're a wise man. My Roaring Flame Society doesn't want much. Give me 90% of your Yi family's assets and I can promise you that I will never step into your house again. What 90% of the assets? Even though Yi Songhai had guessed that Li Yuanlong was going to ask for an exorbitant price, he never imagined that the other party would be so greedy. 90% of the assets was practically giving the entire Yi family to Li Yuanlong. What was the difference between this and the Yi family's downfall? Impossible, this is absolutely impossible. Yi Songhai roared. Humph. Li Yuanlong's face turned cold. He said coldly, old thing, I see that you're refusing a toast only to be forced to drink a forfeit. Since that's the case, don't blame me for not caring about our old friendship. Li Yuanlong strode forward and arrived in front of the crystal coffin in the inner hall. When he saw Yi Ling-er's body in the coffin, the smile on his face became even more ferocious. I heard that this person is Yi Xian's little sister. Her body has been here for half a year. Your Yi family spent tens of millions to build this crystal coffin, just to preserve a dead person. In my opinion, this is simply too wasteful. Why don't you give this coffin to me and exchange it for a large amount of money? Wouldn't that be better? Li Yuanlong kept touching the crystal coffin. His eyes filled with greed. Don't touch her. Yi Songhai and Yi Songhai's faces changed. Yi Ling-er was their last hope in the crystal coffin. If even Yi Ling-er's body couldn't be preserved, then the Yi family would really cease to exist. Yi Songhai's face turned red. He didn't care if he was Li Yuanlong's opponent. He raised his fist and punched. Bang! Without waiting for Yi Songhai to come close, Li Yuanlong smiled sinisterly and kicked Yi Songhai to the ground. The sound of bones breaking was exceptionally ear-piercing. Yi Songhai coughed up a mouthful of blood. His face was as pale as paper as he glared at Li Yuanlong. His eyes were filled with unwillingness and rage. You piece of trash. I used to call you young Master Yi, but now in my eyes you're worse than a dog. Li Yuanlong sneered. Men, throw the woman in the coffin out for me. Send this coffin to the dazzling auction house and ask them how much it's worth. Li Yuanlong immediately ordered his subordinates to take action. Yes, boss. A dozen arcanists shouted excitedly and strode toward the crystal coffin. Li Yuanlong, she is Yi Xian's younger sister. If you dare to touch her, when Yi Xian returns in the future, you will definitely die without a burial ground. Yi Songhai roared furiously. I don't dare. Li Yuanlong sneered and said, using Yi Xian, who we don't know if he's dead or alive, to scare me? Do you think I'm a 3-year-old child? Attack. Li Yuanlong did not waste any time and directly gave the order. A dozen arcanists once again stepped forward and began to pry open the crystal coffin. Woo! Suddenly, the originally sunny sky gradually darkened. A gust of cold wind blew through the Yi family's ancestral home. Cries of the dead could be heard from all directions, startling Li Yuanlong and the others. Their actions of prying open the coffin abruptly stopped. Rumble! Like a meteor falling to earth, like the Milky Way hanging upside down, a blood-colored flowing light traversed across the sky. Following an earth-shattering explosion, the Yi clan's ancestral residence suddenly shook, and a slender figure also appeared in the Yi clan's courtyard. Rumble! Blood-red lightning flashed across the sky. The dark clouds were extremely thick. Under the illumination of this terrifying celestial phenomenon, Yi Xian's body was shrouded in blood-red light. He had his hands behind his back as he looked indifferently at Li Yuanlong and the others. His face was calm and no one could tell what he was thinking. Yi Xian? Yi Songhai's expression was sluggish as he muttered to himself. Then a look of ecstasy appeared on his face. In an instant he seemed to have become dozens of years younger. Hiss! The sound of cold air being sucked in could be heard. Li Yuanlong's pupils dilated and his face instantly turned pale. A large amount of cold sweat rolled down his forehead and his feet unconsciously retreated. Mr. Yi. Li Yuanlong trembled as he spoke. His knees went soft as he knelt on the ground and continuously kowtowed towards Yixian. As for the dozen or so subordinates beside him, they collapsed to the ground like mud. There were even some with weak minds whose crotches were already drenched in urine. It was no wonder that these people were so afraid of Yixian. It was because Yixian was truly terrifying. He had done several major things in the capital, and each of them were ruthless and merciless. No one was left alive. How could Li Yuanlong and the others not feel fear when facing such a great demon? With the invasion of death, sweat poured down like rain. Li Yuanlong and the others were so frightened that they couldn't speak. They kowtowed like they were pounding garlic. They didn't even have the courage to fight to the death with Yixian. How do you want to die? Yixian slowly walked forward. His voice was very calm, so calm that Li Yuanlong and the others felt that death was slowly approaching them. Mr. Yi, spare us. Li Yuanlong trembled as he begged for mercy. He didn't dare to raise his head. Spare us. Yixian gently smiled and said, Go repent in the underworld. Bang! Yixian's palm was like the sky, suppressing all things. Li Yuanlong and the others didn't even have the chance to resist. They instantly exploded into clouds of bloody residue. The bleak and beautiful rain of blood poured over the Yi residence's courtyard. At a glance it was extremely terrifying. Cruel, bloody, and merciless. Yixian's terrifying methods made the father and son of the Yi family pale. However, there was a hint of joy in their eyes. They knew that Yixian's return would completely change the situation of the Yi family's gradual decline. Before the father and son of the Yi family could step forward, a terrifying scene made them stop in their tracks. They looked at Yixian in horror. Rumble! Yixian slightly narrowed his eyes. When his palm and fingers swept through the air, the souls of Li Yuanlong and the others condensed. The gate to the underworld slowly opened. As Yixian's palm sent the dozens of souls into the underworld, his cold and merciless voice rang out in the void. Send them to the Avicii hell, and roast them in the underworld fire forever. They will never be reincarnated. As you command, Lord Yama. From the gate to the underworld came the dark crow's sinister voice. As the gate to the underworld closed, the Yi residents also quieted down. However, the father and son of the Yi family seemed to have lost their souls and were completely stunned. What was that? Yitsong murmured in horror. Unfortunately, Yixian didn't answer the father and son's questions. He slowly walked into the inner hall until he arrived in front of the crystal coffin. Only then did the father and son of the Yi family wake up and quickly walk towards Yixian. Xian, you're finally back. Yitsong Hai's tears flowed down his face. He was choked with sobs and couldn't speak. Chapter 111. I don't like this form of address. You better not call me that. Yixian's eyes were deep and there was no emotion in his voice. Yixian, although I've let you and your son down, he's still your grandfather. What kind of attitude is this? Yitsong Hao reprimanded with a complicated expression. A cold smile appeared on the corner of Yixian's mouth. He narrowed his eyes as he looked at Yitsong Hao and said, Yitsong Hao, I have to admit that you have the grace of giving birth to me, but you've never raised me. Previously I didn't kill you, so it can be considered as repaying your kindness. However, if you still don't know how to advance or retreat, then don't blame me, Yixian, for being ruthless. Thud thud thud. Looking at Yixian's cold gaze, Yitsong Hao's face turned pale and he subconsciously retreated. He fell silent at this moment. Okay, it's good that Yixian is back. We're all family. Don't ruin our relationship over such a small matter. Yitsong Hai hurriedly tried to smooth things over. Xian. Suddenly, the sound of staggering footsteps could be heard from the inner hall. Yi Ping was helping Mrs. Yi out of the inner hall. When Mrs. Yi saw Yixian, tears of excitement flowed from her eyes. Mrs. Ye's appearance made Yixian ignore the father and son of the Yi family. He strode towards Mrs. Yi and said, Mother, I'm back. He's back. My son is finally back. In the past 6 months, Mrs. Yi had become more and more haggard in great grief. However, when she saw Yixian return, there was finally a glimmer of light in her eyes. I shouldn't have made things difficult for you. How can a dead person come back to life? Let's bury Ling and return to Jiangnan, Mrs. Yi said while choking with sobs. Looking at his mother's haggard face, Yixian sighed. This was the only kinship he had and also the last bit of humanity he had. From now on, he would never let his family be in any danger. Bang! Yixian was silent. When he struck out with his palm, the crystal coffin that cost tens of millions instantly shattered. However, it did not harm Yi Ling-er's body. Under the surprised gazes of Mother Yi and the others, a jade bottle appeared in Yixian's hand. Pop! Yixian opened the jade bottle, and Yi Ling-er's soul floated out. Under Yixian's palm and fingers, a large amount of blood-colored runes merged into Yi Ling-er's soul, causing it to instantly merge into her physical body. Wang! A cool breeze surged and the bloody light was misty. Under the stunned gazes of Mother Yi and the others, Yi Ling-er's physical body floated in the air. Her entire body bloomed with a blazing bloody light, blooming with an extremely shocking vitality. Squeak! After a full 10 minutes, the bloody light around Yi Ling-er dissipated and she murmured. She opened her eyes in a daze as if she had a big dream. Such a scene made the father and son of the Yi family dumbfounded. Even Mother Yi and Yi Ping were silent. They could not believe that a person who had been dead for half a year had really come back to life in front of them. If they had not seen it with their own eyes, they would have thought that it was a fantasy. Ling-er? Mother Yi was the first to recover from the shock. She staggered towards her daughter and hugged her tightly. A large amount of tears even wet her cheeks. Being hugged by Mother Yi, Yi Ling-er's eyes were filled with confusion as she muttered to herself, "Mother, I seem to have had a dream. I dreamed that I died and went to hell. Then I saw brother. He said that he would bring me back to the mortal world and let me come back to life. This dream is so real." Hearing Yi Ling-er's words, Mother Yi did not have any thoughts, but the expressions of the father and son of the Yi family changed drastically. They even instantly looked at Yixian with horror in their eyes. The father and son of the Yi family clearly remembered that after Li Yuanlong and the others died, more than 10 pale shadows appeared in the void and were directly thrown into a door by Yixian. There were even faint wails of the dead coming from the door, and some people even called Yixian Yama King. Could it be? Could it be that what Yi Ling-er said is true? Yixian really went to hell before, and that's how he brought her back to life? The father and son of the Yi family thought of this matter and felt terrible. If this was true, then how could Yixian be an ancient warrior? Then what kind of existence is he? When this question arose in the hearts of the father and son of the Yi family, the two of them suddenly felt their hair stand on end. They looked at Yixian with an expression of awe that they had never had before. Yixian could completely feel the panicked emotions of the father and son of the Yi family. This also made him immediately understand that the two of them probably already had a great guess about him. This also made Yixian look deeply at the father and son of the Yi family. Immediately, the two of them turned their heads away and became silent. A warning. Yixian's gaze was an undisguised warning. How could the father and son of the Yi family not understand? Naturally, they did not dare to make a ruckus. "Brother." When Yi Ling-er saw Yixian, she called out to him. She also made Yixian walk slowly to his little sister's side. He comforted her. "Your body is still very weak right now. Rest well for a period of time. When the time comes, we will return to Jiangnan together." Yixian did not explain the truth of the trip to hell. After all, if he did, it would only add unnecessary trouble to him. If this kind of shocking matter were to spread to the outside world, it would definitely attract the attention of the entire world. This was also the result that Yixian did not want to see. "Yixian, you can rest assured. The Yi family has large amounts of tonics. They will definitely help Ling-er recover in the shortest amount of time." Yi Songhai promised. Yixian, you just returned home today. Tonight, let's have dinner together as a family." Yi Songhai lowered his posture, faintly imploring. Unfortunately, Yixian was silent. Only after a dozen breaths did he calmly say, "There's no need for dinner. I still have some things to do. When I return, I will take them back to Jiangnan." After saying this, Yi Xian did not linger for a moment. He turned and walked out the door. This made the father and son of the Yi family extremely disappointed. Mother Yi anxiously said, "Xian where are you going?" "Mom, don't worry about me. It's just that Ling Er's matter is not over yet. I will make the real culprit behind this die without a burial ground." Following Yi Xian's voice, he disappeared from the Yi family ancestral home. A waning moon hung in the sky. Under the moonlight, a skyscraper was illuminated without a speck of dust. On the rooftop of the skyscraper, a cool breeze blew, causing Yi Xian's gray hair to flutter in the wind. His hands were behind his back as he looked at the entire capital. His expression did not change at all. No one knew what he was thinking. Tap tap tap. A series of hurried footsteps sounded. Tai Li and a beautiful girl appeared on the rooftop. When the two saw Yi Xian's back, their eyes were filled with excitement. "Mr. Yi, is it really you?" The beautiful girl was about 16 years old. She gave people a feeling that she was extremely cute, but also stunning. Her beautiful face and curvaceous body made any man who saw her feel the urge to hold her in their arms and ruthlessly ravage her. Sexy loli. These 4 words should be enough to express the girl's appearance. Yi Xian indifferently turned around. When he saw the changes on Linglong's body, a hint of amazement appeared in his eyes. He did not expect that after not seeing this little girl for half a year, she would already be so seductive. He was afraid that when she grew up, all the men in the world would kneel before her. Although Linglong gave Yi Xian a sense of amazement, Yi Xian's heart did not waver in the slightest. When Linglong and Tai Li saw Yi Xian's appearance, they were overjoyed and quickly walked towards him. Chapter 112. "Mr. Yi, you're finally back." The two of them came before Yi Xian. Their voices were filled with excitement as they bowed. "I called Azure Dragon, but I couldn't get through. Where is he?" Yi Xian asked softly. At the mention of Azure Dragon, Linglong bit her lips and a worried look appeared on her face. She quickly described to Yi Xian what had happened to the world in the past 6 months. The Blood Soul exotic beasts were wreaking havoc all over the world, and the Xia was no exception. The entire Martial Security Department was mobilized to fight the Blood Soul exotic beasts all over the country. The communication facilities from before had long been abandoned. Even though the Martial Security Department was understaffed, Azure Dragon still left Tai Li and Linglong in the capital to wait for Yi Xian's appearance. Yi Xian was not surprised at all as he listened to Linglong's description of the world's changes. After all, these Blood Soul exotic beasts had escaped from the Blood Sea battlefield. He had already expected this situation. As Linglong continued to describe, Yi Xian also learned about the supernatural forces that had appeared all over the world. However, these things did not affect him in the slightest. However, Yi Xian could clearly sense that when Linglong mentioned some of the powerful people of the present era, her eyes were filled with great respect. She even seemed to have transformed into a lark, talking endlessly to Yi Xian. "Mr. Yi, you might not know this, but I saw Sword God Yi Lingtian kill the East Sea giant beast with a single slash with my own eyes. There was also that absolute heaven sword god. With just one slash he even..." Before Linglong could continue, Yi Xian frowned slightly and waved his hand to interrupt her. "I'm not interested in knowing who these people are. I've summoned the two of you here today because there's something I need you to do." Linglong held her breath when she saw Yi Xian frowning slightly. She quickly stopped talking. "Mr. Yi, you saved Linglong's life, and I dare not forget the oath we made back then. No matter what orders you have, Linglong will definitely not refuse," Linglong said solemnly. Yi Xian nodded his head in satisfaction when he saw Linglong's respectful attitude. He had saved this woman back then so that she could help him with some matters. Otherwise, Yi Xian would not be so kind as to save someone who had nothing to do with him. "First, pass down my orders. Mobilize all the men of the Wu and department and find the real culprit behind the assassination of Yi Ling at the airport in Jingdu half a year ago. The second matter is that I need a group of death warriors for my use. As for how to find these death warriors, I'll leave it to the two of you to decide. However, you must get it done in the shortest time possible," Yi Xian said firmly. Tai Li and Linglong were stunned when Yi Xian instructed them to do these two things. A troubled expression flashed across their faces. Tai Li even had a bitter smile on his face as he said, Mr. Yi, you think too highly of the two of us. Although the second matter is difficult to handle, it's not impossible. But the first thing you ordered is to mobilize the entire Wu and department's strength. However, the members of Wu and department's 8 teams have all gone to various places to fight exotic beasts. With just a word from you, how can they? Tai Li wanted to say something, but he stopped and did not continue. Obviously, Yi Xian was only a guest of Earth Team. He did not have that much authority to mobilize the entire Wu and department for his use. If it were the previous world, with Yi Xian's reputation, the 8 team leaders would give him some face. However, the entire world was in turmoil now. The 8 team leaders were already in a terrible fix. How could they have the time to help Yi Xian investigate the so-called real culprit behind the scenes? Yi Xian naturally understood this logic. However, since he could say such words, he naturally had a certain level of confidence. Tell the 8 team leaders that I want to see them at the Wu and department headquarters in 7 days. If any of them don't show up, then don't blame me, Yi Xian, for falling out with them. Yi Xian's voice was cold, causing Tai Li and Ling Long's faces to turn bitter. However, they could only agree because both of them knew that this Mr. Yi in front of them was a man of his word. The two of them only needed to pass on the message. As for whether the 8 team leaders came or not, it had nothing to do with the two of them. Yi Xian gave the two of them some more instructions. An hour later, Yi Xian drifted away. Looking at Yi Xian's disappearing figure, Tai Li sighed. Then, he looked at Ling Long and said with a hint of worry in his eyes, Ling Long, you didn't tell Mr. Yi that the Nation Protector Sword God wants to take you as his disciple. Don't mention this again. You should know that I've already sworn to serve Mr. Yi for 10 years. How can I really take Yi Lingtian as my master? Ling Long said coldly, but are you really willing to do that? Tai Li's expression was complicated as he continued. You must know that Yi Lingtian was the second strongest expert in the world 100 years ago. His sword technique is divine. If you can obtain his inheritance, you'll definitely be an outstanding person in the future. Why don't you beg Mr. Yi and ask him to let you go? Alright, stop talking. Ling Long's expression turned cold. She turned around and walked away. Sigh. Tai Li sighed. He knew that this matter was too difficult. He quickly followed Ling Long and the two of them disappeared into the night. The warden, as the name suggested, was a place to imprison criminals. Since ancient times, anyone who had committed a serious crime would be sentenced by the Supreme Court and imprisoned in the warden's prison to serve their sentence. Some of the most heinous criminals would also be temporarily detained in the warden's prison before they were executed. Using heavy punishments in troubled times was a precedent in every dynasty, and the Xia kingdom was no exception. With the world in turmoil, there would naturally be people with ulterior motives stirring up trouble. However, in front of the colossus that was Xia, those with ulterior motives were directly suppressed. Those with light crimes were sentenced to death, while those with heinous crimes were sentenced to death. This caused the warden to become overcrowded. Capital City, the warden. The black iron gate was tightly shut. An electric net of brambles and iron wires flickered with blue lightning from time to time. There were also heavily guarded soldiers patrolling the prison. At this moment, Yi Xian stood in front of the prison gate, attracting the attention of the patrolling soldiers. However, Yi Xian did not do anything out of the ordinary, so it was not appropriate for the soldiers to investigate. Buzz! Suddenly, the prison gate slowly opened. A middle-aged man in an official's uniform walked out quickly, followed by a large number of prison guards. These people walked nervously towards Yi Xian with flattering smiles on their faces. Mr. Yi, we are honored by your presence. Please forgive me for not going out to meet you. Zhang Bin, the warden of the capital city. Although his official position was not high, and he was even less popular in the capital city, in this prison he was the supreme existence. Originally, Zhang Bin was very leisurely. He was so leisurely that he played cards every day, drank a few sips of wine in the office, and patrolled the prison with his subordinates when he was free. As long as he ensured that the criminals did not escape, it could be said that his life was very peaceful. However, Zhang Bin's peaceful days had come to an end. Just last night, he was still sleeping in his warm bed when a call from the Ministry of War woke him up completely. He even told him that an extremely important person would be coming to the capital city's warden for an inspection today. No matter what the other party wanted, he had to cooperate fully. Chapter 113. The Big Boss of the Ministry of War. That was an existence that Zhang Bin looked up to. He never thought that the big boss of the Ministry of War would personally call him. How could someone who could be valued so highly by the big boss of the Ministry of War be an ordinary person? When Zhang Bin carefully asked who was coming to the prison for inspection, Yi Xian's name also entered Zhang Bin's ears. It made him shiver and his entire body tremble. Although Yi Xian had disappeared for half a year, his name had spread throughout capital city. How could Zhang Bin not know this person? Zhang Bin had arrived at the prison early in the morning to wait for Yi Xian's arrival. He was afraid that he would offend this Mr. Yi again due to his lack of etiquette. No need for formalities. Has the person I want been arranged? Yi Xian said calmly. I've already arranged everything. Mr. Yi, please come in. Zhang Bin smiled obsequiously and led the way for Yi Xian. The group of people entered the prison in a grandiose manner. The four walls were densely covered with electric fences. There were also many soldiers with rifles patrolling the prison. That was the scene that Yi Xian saw. After passing through the prison gate, Zhang Bin led the way. From time to time, Yi Xian could see criminals walking around the prison. However, these criminals were all followed by prison guards, making them appear even more listless. Soon Yi Xian saw a sports field in front of him under Zhang Bin's guidance. The sports field was as big as a football field. It was surrounded by electric fences, and there were thousands of criminals trapped in it. They were all bald and wore prison uniforms. Their eyes were lifeless as if they had lost their souls. That was the state of thousands of criminals. Open the gate. Following Zhang Bin's shout, the two jailers quickly opened the door. There were also a large number of soldiers armed with rifles guarding Yi Xian and the others. Mr. Yi, please. Zhang Bin smiled obsequiously. Yi Xian slowly walked in, and Zhang Bin quickly followed. He even gestured to the jailer behind him to have the gun-wielding soldiers quickly follow the two of them. In the sports field, when Yi Xian arrived at a high platform, he looked down at the thousands of criminals below. These criminals, who were already numb and lifeless, finally noticed the existence of Yi Xian and the others. They all looked towards Yi Xian and the others. Mr. Yi, there are a total of 1024 people here. Every one of them has committed a heinous crime and has been sentenced to death by the Supreme Court. They will be executed on the next day. Zhang Bin reminded in a low voice. Hey, isn't this Warden Zhang? What brings you here today? Head Warden Zhang, you've brought a pretty boy. Are you going to give us a treat? This tender little thing makes Lao Tzu drool. I wonder if she can withstand Lao Tzu's torment in bed. Thousands of death row criminals laughed loudly. All kinds of obscenities were heard from time to time, as if they were venting their inner frustrations. This made Zhang Bin's face turn gloomy. He even stole glances at Yi Xian from the corner of his eyes, afraid that Yi Xian would be dissatisfied. Shut up, you bastards! Zhang Bin scolded. Hey, Head Warden Zhang is angry? Could it be that this pretty boy is your lover? Haha! All sorts of laughter could be heard incessantly, causing Zhang Bin to be so angry that he was speechless. Although Zhang Bin was the warden, he had no way to control these prisoners who were about to be executed. After all, they were about to die. Why would they be afraid of a mere warden? Mr. Yi, I'm really sorry. Zhang Bin's face was red as he bowed and apologized to Yi Xian. At this moment, Yi Xian's eyes were indifferent. His gaze swept across the faces of these death row criminals. Then he said to Zhang Bin, You can take your men out now? Yes. Ah, Mr. Yi, what did you say? Zhang Bin's expression changed drastically. He looked at Yi Xian with horror in his eyes. I said you can take your men out now. Yi Xian frowned slightly and repeated himself. Mr. Yi, you can't do that. Zhang Bin's face was pale while large amounts of cold sweat appeared on his forehead, and he said anxiously, You don't know, but these people are about to be executed. If you're left here alone, then they'll definitely kill you. It was no wonder that Zhang Bin was so afraid. Although Mr. Yi was a martial artist, the death row criminals on the field were all vicious people. There were thousands of them. As the saying goes, 2 fists are no match for 4 hands. Zhang Bin was very sure that if Yi Xian was left here alone, he would end up in an extremely miserable state. If something happened to Yi Xian, how would he explain it to his superiors? That was what Zhang Bin was most worried about. Did you not understand what I said? Yi Xian said coldly. But. Zhang Bin stuttered and refused to leave with his men. Go. I'll take care of everything, Yi Xian said coldly. Yes, sir. Zhang Bin looked hesitant, but in the end, he gritted his teeth and left the field with the soldiers behind him. However, before he left, he kept warning the death row criminals that if they dared to be rude to Yi Xian, they would suffer a fate worse than death. Unfortunately, how could these death row inmates put Zhang Bin's warning in their eyes? At this moment, their eyes were shining as they looked at Yi Xian, who was on the high platform. There were even some who faintly walked towards Yi Xian. As Zhang Bin left with his men, Yi Xian stood on the high platform and looked down at the thousands of death row criminals. His expression was calm and there was no fear. Brothers, I Li Laosan want this gigolo. If anyone dares to steal him from me, don't blame me for fucking killing you. A middle-aged man with a ferocious face looked at Yi Xian with a lustful gaze. He was striding towards Yi Xian. Haha, Li Laosan, go easy on him. Don't break this gigolo. Someone laughed out loud. This kid is really looking for death. Doesn't he know where he is? How dare he face us alone? Someone laughed cruelly. The atmosphere in the field was lively. Most people looked at Yi Xian as if they were looking at a dead man. You idiots. Have you all been locked up until you became stupid? It was a thin and weak-looking young man who wore a pair of gold-rimmed glasses. He gave off a refined feeling, but when he said those words, the prisoners were startled. They looked at him with eyes filled with fear. Brother Jean, what do you mean? Someone asked. This person dares to face us alone. He's either an idiot or he doesn't take us seriously at all. I'm more inclined to the second possibility. I'm afraid this Li Laosan will end up very badly. The skinny young man said with certainty. He looked at Yi Xian with even more surprise. On the high platform, Li Laosan was less than 3 meters away from Yi Xian. At that moment, his face was filled with a ferocious smile. He looked at Yi Xian from head to toe and said a lot of obscene words. Tisk tsk. This body, this skin. Lao Tzu can meet such a fine specimen like you before he dies. The heavens have eyes. Today Lao Tzu will. Chapter 114. Qi. Suddenly, without waiting for old Li San to finish his words, Yi Xian did not move. His sword fingers streaked across the air, and an extremely terrifying bloody light shot out from his sword fingers. Old Li San's smile had not faded away, but his entire body was cut in half at the waist, turning into 2 horrifying halves of a corpse that fell limply onto the high platform. Glaring blood spurted out, and a corpse that was too horrible to look at. This was the scene that appeared before the eyes of the thousands of death row prisoners, and it also caused the entire field to become eerily silent. After a full 10 breaths, an unknown person let out a scream, completely breaking the dead silence on the field. It also caused the death row prisoners to cry out in alarm. Finally, a trace of fear appeared in their eyes as they looked at Yi Xian. Tap tap tap. The wind was light and the clouds were light, untainted by a speck of dust. Yi Xian strolled on the high platform. With every step he took, it was as if he was stepping on the apex of the hearts of these prisoners, making it difficult for them to breathe. In my eyes, Yi Xian, all of you are a bunch of trash, scum, and maggots in a cesspool. Yi Xian's voice was cold and emotionless. His eyes were filled with disdain as he looked at these prisoners. As Yi Xian's voice fell, the expressions of the thousands of death row prisoners changed. Some of them even took out sharp weapons sharpened from toothbrushes from their arms, and their gazes towards Yi Xian became extremely fierce. Although Yi Xian had displayed a bloody scene, these people were not frightened. After all, they were all people who were about to die, and had long been prepared to die. They were not so afraid that they did not dare to attack Yi Xian. Sir, don't think that just because you're an ancient martial artist that you can make us afraid just because you killed old Li San. Why don't you tell us why you're here? The young man with the gold-rimmed glasses strolled out, looking at Yi Xian with a puzzled expression. Yi Xian could completely see that this young man was an extremely shrewd person. This made him nod with slight satisfaction, and he said, "You're very good. You're not as stupid as them." As Yi Xian said this, he looked at the death row prisoners in a scrutinizing manner. His voice was strange and sinister as he said, "I'm here today to play a game with you. The rules of this game are very simple. There is no time limit. With this field as the boundary, the thousands of you will kill each other. No matter what method you use, as long as you kill your companions around you, the first 100 people who survive will become the final victors." As Yi Xian said this, his voice paused slightly, and his expression became increasingly strange. He said, "Of course, this game naturally has the rewards you want. The 100 people who survive will not be executed, and will also leave this prison with me. From then on, you will become Yi Xian's lackeys." As Yi Xian's words fell, the thousands of death row prisoners became deathly silent. Only the sound of heavy breathing could be heard from the crowd, and an extremely oppressive atmosphere grew in the crowd. How important was life? If not for the desperate situation, no one would want to die. These death row prisoners were no exception. "Why should we believe you? Everyone, don't believe him. He's making us kill each other." After the silence, someone loudly refuted Yi Xian. "You are all people who will die. You have no choice. Whether you believe or not, it's all up to you. Now the game begins." Like a demon's temptation, like a devil's guidance, Yi Xian's smile was strange and sinister, and it caused the entire field to once again sink into an oppressive atmosphere. Some people quickly kept a distance from the people around them, and their faces were full of vigilance. "Second brother, you and I are sworn brothers. Why are you so far away from me? Do you really believe this person's nonsense?" In a remote corner, a large man with dark skin was bitterly and hatefully rebuking a young man. His face was filled with extreme sadness. Big brother. Looking at the large man's sorrowful appearance, the young man bit his lips and guilt appeared in his eyes. Yes, this was his big brother who had been sworn brothers for 10 years. What was wrong with him? Could it be that he did not even trust his sworn brother? Looking at the young man's guilty face, the large man laughed boldly and strode towards the young man. He said, "Second brother, do you still remember that when you and I became sworn brothers, we swore together that even if we were not born on the same year, month, and day, we would die on the same year, month, and day. Even if we were sentenced to death, we would still be good men after 18 years. Big brother has never regretted knowing you." "Big brother, I was wrong. I should not have doubted you." Hearing the large man's bold words, the young man's mind was shaken, and he directly choked with sobs. He strode forward and knelt in front of the large man, and tears of guilt fell from his eyes. "Second brother." The large man's face was still bold, as if he had already given up his life. He stretched out his hand and pressed on the young man's shoulder, as if he wanted to help him up. However, at this moment, a cruel and cold smile appeared on the large man's face. Crack! It was vicious and as fast as the wind. Before the young man could react, the large man's broad palms were like 2 iron pliers, and they directly grabbed the young man's neck. Under the effect of a huge force, the young man's neck was irregularly twisted, and a large amount of blood flowed out from the corner of his mouth. Ugh! The young man's eyes were filled with fear, and he stared at his sworn brother in front of him. His body was constantly twitching, and he was desperately struggling. However, the large man's face was ferocious, and his hands were holding the young man's neck, and his eyes were filled with madness and excitement. Die. The large man laughed madly, and his eyes were filled with madness. He said, "Second brother, I'm sorry. I don't want to do this either, but only by killing you first will I have a glimmer of hope to survive. Don't you think so?" The young man struggled in pain. He wanted to roar, and he wanted to roar even more. However, as the large man's strength increased, the young man could clearly feel that his throat was breaking, and his tongue was already sticking out. He was already in a situation where he was going to die. If the young man had known that this would be the result, he would have made the first move to gain the upper hand. However, there was no medicine for regret in this world. In the end, he could only have his neck broken by his so-called sworn brother and die. Unwilling, angry, resentful, and regretful. With these complex emotions, the young man's body stiffened, and he finally stopped breathing. However, his eyes were wide open before he died, proving that he died with regrets. Bang! The large man threw the young man's body on the ground like he was throwing away garbage, and his face was even more cruel and fierce. He looked around at the prisoners present, and then quickly took out 2 chopsticks from his chest. The sharp wooden tip seemed to be emitting a bloodthirsty light, and he was cautious and ruthless against the other prisoners. Such a scene naturally fell into the eyes of thousands of prisoners, and it was also because of this scene that the prisoners present were in a complete mess. The trust between people was gone, and everyone quickly kept a distance from the people around them. Even if they were brothers, they did not trust each other. Chapter 115. Pucci. A toothbrush sharpened into a sharp weapon and pierced his companion's throat. Blood splattered onto the ground as the corpse turned cold and stiff. Bang! A bluestone brick smashed into the back of a prisoner's head without warning, killing him on the spot. Stabbing eyes, kicking crotches, kicking sand, the majority of the prisoners who did not have weapons in their hands were using all kinds of despicable methods. At this moment, the thousands of prisoners had completely turned into a group of mad dogs. They were willing to do anything in order to become the 100 survivors and live a good life. Zhuang Dikun, do you still remember how you humiliated Lao Tzu when he first entered prison? Now you can die for Lao Tzu. A skinny young man with a crazed and bloodthirsty face smashed a brick at a middle-aged man. A large amount of blood dyed his body red, but it made him laugh crazily. De Zhuang, you are my younger brother. We can only survive if we work together. A pair of brothers confronted each other. The older brother had a bitter expression as he tried to persuade his younger brother. Big brother, we are brothers. I believe in you. The younger brother put down the sharp iron ruler in his hand, which made the older brother happy. They were ready to face this game of death together. Pucci. Suddenly, the sharp iron ruler pierced through the older brother's heart. A cold feeling spread throughout the older brother's body. He slowly turned his head and saw his younger brother's cold and cruel eyes. Big brother, do you think I am a 3-year-old child? Even if you are my older brother, do you think I will trust you at this time? The younger brother growled fiercely. A line of clear tears flowed from the older brother's eyes. He trembled as he looked at his younger brother, who he had loved since he was young. His eyes were filled with endless sorrow. De Zhuang, I never thought of killing you. Do you remember? When you were young, a group of hoodlums surrounded you with knives, said that they were going to hack you to death. It was I, your eldest brother, who protected you under my body. I was stabbed dozens of times. Big brother's voice trembled. Blood sprayed out from his chest, making him seem even more mournful and cold. At this moment, the younger brother's body trembled. He closed his eyes as the scene from back then flashed through his mind. A large amount of tears flowed from his eyes as he knelt on the ground. Big brother, don't blame me. Please don't blame me. I really don't want to die. The younger brother wailed loudly as if he had gone crazy. Pucci. The younger brother suddenly pulled out the iron ruler from his older brother's chest. A smear of blood sprayed on his face. The younger brother seemed to have turned into a walking corpse. He looked at his older brother, who was gradually losing his life, and his voice was cruel and ferocious. Big brother, don't worry. Although you're dead, I'll definitely survive. Let me carry your life and go see the wonderful world outside. Kill. The younger brother swung a sharp iron ruler as if he had gone mad. As long as the people around him were killed, he would ruthlessly and mercilessly stab at the other prisoners. Calm. Battle cries, angry curses, and anguished wails entered his ears. Madness was spreading, and the aura of slaughter was expanding. The thick smell of blood drifted in the air, making people want to vomit, but it also made the prisoners go crazy. On the high platform, Yixian had his hands behind his back. When he opened and closed his eyes, there was only coldness and ruthlessness. A strange smile appeared at the corner of his mouth. Heaven is merciless and treats all things as straw dogs. Earth is merciless and buries the souls of the dead in all ages. People are merciless and can kill in the world. Kill, fight. Only in the endless blood and fighting can you become my Yi Xian's lackeys and sweep away all obstacles in the world for me. Like the sound of the war drums of slaughter and the turmoil of hell, Yi Xian's voice was ruthless and cruel. However, it seemed to be a catalyst that made the prisoners completely bathed in blood and fight. Thousands of people killing each other was bloody and terrifying. Perhaps in the eyes of outsiders it was an extremely terrifying thing. However, in Yi Xian's eyes it was a transformation of the mind. Only by abandoning the 7 emotions and 6 desires of these prisoners, and completely turning them into killing machines, Yi Xian wanted the men of sacrifice. What was a men of sacrifice? The meaning of life was to kill. This was the men of sacrifice in Yi Xian's eyes. The killing continued and blood sprayed. More and more corpses appeared on the field. It was as if it had turned into a mountain of corpses and a sea of blood. It made people feel extremely horrified when they looked at it. Yi Xian looked at them indifferently. From beginning to end, he didn't show the slightest bit of pity. A few figures among them had also slightly attracted his attention. The man with the gold-rimmed glasses was like a venomous snake. He was always in the dark, waiting for an opportunity to strike. He did not move, but when he did, several prisoners would die in his hands. A thin young man had a silly smile on his face. He had been squatting in a corner and eating the steamed bun in his hand. Although the steamed bun was soaked in blood, it did not affect his appetite at all. When he swallowed the last mouthful of the steamed bun, the smirking young man suddenly stood up. With a raise of his hand, all the prisoners closest to him died miserably. He kicked their genitals and blinded their eyes. He punched out and went straight for their temples. With a kick, the sound of knees breaking could be heard. No one could survive under his hands. In the pile of corpses, a wretched fatso was covered in blood. He looked like a corpse as he crawled in the pile of corpses. He only held a sharp chopstick in his hand. Every time a prisoner passed by him, this fatso would drag the prisoner's legs and make them fall to the ground. He would then stab the chopstick in his hand into the prisoner's throat at lightning speed. He would then continue to play dead and wait for the next prey to come. The killing continued and the prisoners wailed. On the high platform, Yi Xian's eyes were deep and he slowly nodded. "Stop. The game is over." It was a simple word, but it sounded like a celestial voice. It also made the prisoners stop killing. They looked blankly at Yi Xian on the high platform, as if they had not woken up from the killing. The game is over? I'm still alive? I'm not dead? I can get out of here alive? The prisoners who survived could not believe that they were still alive. They looked around blankly and muttered to themselves. When they realized that they were indeed still alive, they burst into indescribable sounds of excitement. Haha! Lao Tzu is not dead. Lao Tzu survived. It's good that you're all dead. It's good that you're all dead. Lao Tzu can only survive if you're all dead. Cheers and crazy laughter. This was the scene that unfolded in front of Yi Xian. However, Yi Xian knew that although they survived, they had lost their humanity. From now on, they would completely turn into killing machines that would be used by him. Chapter 116. The prisoners were cheering, but some were extremely calm. The man with the gold-rimmed glasses was one of them. He stared at Yi Xian and strode forward. "Sir, I have to say that your methods are extremely vicious. Isn't it time for you to fulfill your promise?" Bang! Suddenly there was an explosion in the void. The man with the gold-rimmed glasses was sent flying. A large amount of blood spewed out of his mouth as he collapsed to the ground like a pile of mud. Thud thud thud. Yi Xian strolled down the arena until he was in front of the man with the gold-rimmed glasses. He stepped on the man's face with his wide foot. As he exerted force, his foot kept grinding on the man's face. "I don't like your attitude. This is just a small lesson for you to remember who is the king and who is the subject." Yi Xian said coldly, "Do you understand?" Understood." The man with the gold-rimmed glasses trembled slightly before Yi Xian moved his foot away. Then, he looked around at the few remaining prisoners and said coldly, "From today onwards, you are my lackeys. If I tell you to go east, you will not go west. I don't want to know your former names. All you need to remember is that I, Yi Xian, am your master. Under my will, you will turn into mad dogs and tear apart all obstacles for me. Rumble. The void trembled and blood traces floated in the air. Yixian flicked his fingers and hundreds of blood-red runes entered the prisoners' foreheads. His eerie voice sounded at this moment. This is the blood-soul contract. As long as you are loyal to me, the blood-soul contract will not take effect. If you betray me, you will die without a burial place and will never be reincarnated. As Yixian spoke to hear, his voice paused for a moment before he continued. Of course, I've always been a person who rewards and punishes clearly, so I definitely won't treat you unfairly. As long as you've contributed, I will bestow upon you extraordinary strength. This is also your reward. Now you can leave this place with me. Under the complicated gazes of the prisoners, Yixian turned around and walked towards the outside world. This caused them to hesitate for a moment, but they still quickly caught up to Yixian. Outside the sports field, Zhang Bin and the other jailers were trembling, and their faces were extremely pale. They couldn't be blamed for acting like this. It was because they had personally witnessed the bloody incident that had occurred inside. To Zhang Bin and the others, this was something they would probably never forget for the rest of their lives. When the iron wire net was activated and Yixian appeared outside with a group of death row prisoners, Zhang Bin's face turned as white as paper. He looked at Yixian with an extremely horrified expression, but he still bowed to Yixian while trembling. A mystery. Looking at Zhang Bin's terrified expression, Yixian's expression was calm as he said, I'll have to trouble you for today's matter. I want to take these people away. Is there any problem? No problem. Zhang Bin forced a smile, his heart trembling as he thought, how could I dare to have any problem in front of a demon like you? Wouldn't that be courting death? Now Zhang Bin only wanted to send this demon away as soon as possible, because he would feel uncomfortable if Yixian stayed in front of him for even a moment longer. It was as if he was facing a ferocious beast that could swallow him whole at any time. Under Zhang Bin's respectful escort, Yixian finally walked out of the warden's gate with a group of death row prisoners. When these prisoners saw the light of day again, they breathed in the air outside fiercely. Some of them even cried out, proving how excited they were. In the suburbs of the capital city, in an abandoned factory, 100 prisoners had already changed into new clothes. Everyone's face was filled with excitement. In front of them, Yixian stood with his hands behind his back. When his eyes opened and closed, there was a flash of blood-red light. No one knew what he was thinking. Thank you, Master, for letting us see the light of day again. Although the man with the gold-rimmed glasses was scheming, when he faced Yixian, he felt fear from the bottom of his heart. He was the first to bow. Thank you, Master, for letting us see the light of day again. The others quickly followed suit, causing a deafening sound to ring out in the abandoned factory. Looking at the respectful appearance of the 100 prisoners, Yixian nodded in satisfaction and said, You've proven yourselves to me by being able to survive the massacre of 1,000 people. From today onwards, the 100 of you will be divided into 4 groups. The first group, Dark Knight Ancestor, will be responsible for spying and assassination. The second group, Blood Fiend Ancestor, will focus on martial arts and clear all obstacles for me. The third group, Shadow Group, will infiltrate the major forces of the world and wait for my orders at any time. The fourth group, Grim Reaper Group, will become my personal guards and will follow my orders at any time. Following Yixian's orders, the 100 men were quickly divided into 4 groups, with 25 people in each group. However, everyone had a troubled look on their faces. Obviously, they knew that they were just ordinary people. How could they complete the orders given by Yixian in the future? Yixian had already expected this situation. Unknowingly, 4 books appeared in his hands and he casually tossed them to the man with the gold-rimmed glasses. The man quickly caught them, but he looked at Yixian with a slightly puzzled expression. From today onwards, you're the leader of the Dark Knight group. Your code name is Viper. These 4 cultivation methods are enough to allow you to advance from ordinary people to martial arts masters in 3 months. If you're extremely talented, you can even step into the innate realm. As Yixian's words fell, it immediately caused an uproar. The members of the 4 groups looked at the 4 cultivation methods with fanatical gazes, their eyes filled with excitement. Ancient warrior? Becoming a master in 3 months? This was something that they did not even dare to think about. However, this opportunity was right in front of them now. How could they not be excited? As Yi Xian continued to give orders, the remaining 3 group leaders were chosen. The leader of the Blood Fiend group was the young man with the silly smile. His code name was Steamed Bun. The leader of the Shadow group was the young man who killed his brother. His code name was Cold Blood. The last group, Grim Reaper group, was the wretched Fatso. His code name was Fatso Huang. I don't like being called master. You can call me Mr. Yi in front of outsiders. You can also call me Lord Ming in private, said Yi Xian calmly when everything was arranged. Lord Ming, then our group will be called? Fatso Huang probed. Yi Xian's eyes were deep as he pondered for a while. Then, he said softly, let's call it Underworld. Underworld? Fatso Huang mumbled to himself. It was as if these 2 words had a strange infectious power. They kept murmuring from the mouths of the members of the 4 groups. What they did not know was that the birth of Underworld in this abandoned factory today would make the forces of the world extremely fearful in the future. Everything was over. Other than Fatso Huang leading the Grim Reaper group to follow Yi Xian, the members of the other 3 groups all left the abandoned factory and rushed to Jiangnan City. Due to the presence of Zhuo Junting in Jiangnan City, Yi Xian had already instructed her to find a secret base for the members of the 3 groups to undergo a 3-month devilish training. Chapter 117. July was like fire, and the scorching sun was scorching. The afternoon sun was even more scorching. In such hot weather, most people would choose to stay in their houses with the air conditioner on, and drink some ice water to lower their body temperature. It was indeed a very suitable thing. Capital, Courtyard House, Yi Xian's temporary residence. Yi Xian was very relaxed. He rested on the rocking chair with his eyes closed, while the 25 death guards were sitting cross-legged and cultivating under the scorching sun. There was an explosion in the air, and they slowly opened their eyes. A cruel and cold bloody light flashed across the death guards' eyes. The energy around their bodies surged, causing the air around them to explode. Thank you, Ming Jun, for your nurturing. The death guards half knelt on the ground and thanked Yi Xian respectfully. Yi Xian slowly opened his eyes and said calmly, although I have performed the enlightenment technique on all of you, allowing you to step into the realm of ancient martial arts grandmaster within 3 days. This is after all an act of pulling up seedlings to help them grow. All of you now have strength, but you know nothing about the Tao of martial arts. You still need more training. As the team leader of the Grim Reaper, Fatty Huang didn't have the slightest bit of the dignity of a team leader. Instead, he smiled fawningly at Yi Xian like a merchant and said, your cultivation is peerless. For us to be able to become your personal guards is a blessing from our previous lives. Please pass down the path of martial skills to us so that we can improve further. Looking at Fatso Huang's servile appearance, Yi Xian smiled. He looked at Fatso Huang with admiration. Perhaps in the eyes of outsiders, Fatso Huang did not have any dignity, but in Yi Xian's eyes, Fatso Huang was the most terrifying one among them. Although he looked cheerful on the surface, he was definitely the most vicious and cruel person in Group 4. This was also the reason why Yi Xian made him the leader of the Death Guards. The so-called martial arts techniques, in my opinion, are just techniques to kill people. What you are going to learn is naturally not the so-called martial arts techniques of those ancient martial arts practitioners. What I am going to teach you is also a true killing technique. As Yi Xian's voice rang out, the Death God's personal guards listened attentively, constantly engraving the killing techniques that Yi Xian described in their minds. As for how much they could comprehend, it all depended on their own perception. It had been 3 days since Yi Xian established Hell. Within 3 days, he had directly raised the Grim Reaper bodyguard from an ordinary person to an ancient martial arts master. This was also so that the Grim Reaper bodyguard could help him as soon as possible. If news of this spread to the outside world, some people would think it was a fantasy. However, in the eyes of Yi Xian, a cultivator in the crossing calamity stage, the so-called ancient martial arts grandmasters were nothing. If he wanted, he could promote these people to the innate realm. Just as Yi Xian was preaching, a melodious ringtone sounded. It made Yi Xian disperse the crowd and pick up the phone. Good, well done. Tell them to wait for me at the headquarters of the Martial Security Department. As Yixian hung up the phone, a smile appeared at the corner of his mouth. The call was from Ling Long. She told Yixian that the 8 team leaders had returned and were waiting for Yixian's arrival. Fatso Huang, do you want to see the legendary Martial Security Department? Yixian asked with a smile. Hearing Yixian's words, Fatso Huang was shocked. He rolled his eyes and knew that Yixian wanted to train him. He quickly bowed and said, I've always heard that there are 8 team leaders in the Martial Security Department. They are all people with great skills. If I can meet them, it would be my good fortune. Yixian likes smart people very much. There was no doubt that Fatso Huang was a smart person. Yixian would spare no effort to train smart people who were loyal to him. Martial Security Department, I hope you won't disappoint me, Yixian muttered to himself. Then, he strode out of the door and let Fatso Huang follow quickly. Martial Security Department Headquarters, Conference Room. The 8 team leaders sat here. The Heaven Team and Xian Team were the newly appointed team leaders. Previously, White Wolf Minji had died at the hands of Yixian in the martial arts competition. It could be said that there was a great enmity between the 2 teams. As for these 2 new team leaders, they were both chosen from among the short ones. They were both originally vice team leaders, and the 2 of them were only ordinary ancient martial grandmasters. Naturally, they knew Yixian, so it could be said that they were extremely afraid of him. However, the 2 teams had already formed enmity with Yixian. As the new team leaders, they naturally could not show any fear of Yixian. At this moment, they were sitting there with a serious expression. The other team leaders had different expressions. Only Azure Dragon's face was flushed red. He was looking forward to Yixian's arrival. Tap tap tap. A series of light footsteps came from outside the door. It also made the team leaders of the 8 teams change their expressions. They hurriedly stood up and looked outside the door. Yixian was dressed in black. His gray hair fell behind his head. He strolled into the conference room. Fatso Huang's face was full of unscrupulous smiles. He followed closely behind Yixian. When he saw the team leaders of the 8 teams, he bowed and bent his knees. His face was full of flattery. Greetings, Mr. Yi. The 8 team leaders cupped their fists and bowed. Their posture was extremely humble. Obviously, Yixian's battle with Li Huantian had completely established his supreme prestige. Yixian smiled. He gave off a temperament like the spring wind and rain. He leaned lazily against the seat in the center. Then he looked around at the people present. No one dared to look at him. However, Yixian's actions made the team leaders of the 8 teams reveal a trace of dissatisfaction. This was because Yixian was sitting in the position of the secretary of Wu-En. It symbolized the highest authority of the Wu-En department. Of course, the secretary of Wu-En was just an ordinary person. The 8 team leaders did not take him seriously at all. However, Yixian was different. Since the battle with Li Huantian, his reputation had spread and he had intimidated the members of the 8 teams. Now that he had taken the initiative to sit in this position, could it be that this person wanted to take charge of the entire Wu-En department? When this thought appeared in everyone's mind, everyone's expression turned ugly. The atmosphere in the conference room was also clearly oppressive at this moment. Why are you all standing? Sit down. As Yixian's voice fell, the 8 team leaders held their breaths. It was obvious that this Mr. Yi did not come with good intentions. He faintly regarded them as his subordinates. This caused the 8 team leaders to feel extremely uneasy. Yixian leaned lazily against the chair and did not make a sound. Meanwhile, Fatso Huang stood beside Yixian with a flattering smile. However, the way he looked at the 8 team leaders vaguely revealed a sinister look. Tap tap tap. Yixian's fingers tapped on the conference table. A rhythmic sound was heard. An extremely oppressive atmosphere spread, causing the 8 team leaders to feel as if they were sitting on pins and needles. Finally, Tianyu was the first to break the silence. He cupped his hands and bowed to Yixian. Mr. Yi, you've been missing for half a year. Now that you've returned to the Wu-En department, you've even gathered us here. Do you have any instructions for us? Ha ha. Yixian laughed. He really laughed. However, his laughter was chilling. I don't like to talk nonsense. Don't you know why I've gathered all of you here? Yixian said lazily. However, when his words fell into everyone's ears, They felt a chill in their hearts. Chapter 118. Everyone present already knew the purpose of Yi Xian's visit. It was to investigate the real culprit behind the murder of Yi Linger at the capital city airport half a year ago. However, with the blood soul beasts wreaking havoc in the outside world, how could they spare the manpower to investigate this matter for Yi Xian? Mr. Yi, the entire world is in chaos right now, and there are terrifying beasts wreaking havoc all over the country of Xia. If we mobilize the entire Wuhan department to help you find the real culprit, then the people who have been devastated will have no one to protect them. Please understand, Mr. Yi, Tianyu said righteously. Sir Tianyu is right. Mr. Yi, you have to know that it's not that we don't want to help you, but the Wuhan department is in a terrible state right now. We really don't have the extra manpower to investigate this matter for you. That's right. The members of the expedition all over the country have suffered heavy casualties. If we recruit more people to investigate this matter, then our Wuhan department will be in even worse shape in this global chaos. The two newly appointed team leaders spoke at the right time. They even showed a sorrowful expression, as if Yi Xian was making things difficult for them. Although the other team leaders did not interrupt, they also looked troubled. It was obvious that they agreed with Tianyu and the others. At this moment, Yi Xian's expression was calm, making it impossible to tell what he was thinking. However, when he opened and closed his eyes, he constantly swept his gaze across everyone present, causing them to feel a chill in their hearts. The entire conference room became deathly silent. Clap, clap, clap. Suddenly, Yi Xian slowly clapped, and the corners of his mouth curled into a cold smile. When Yi Xian placed his arms on the table and narrowed his eyes at everyone present, his voice was cold and strange. Righteous, moral kidnapping, impassioned. I think these words should be very suitable for you, right? If I force you to help me find the real culprit behind this, then I, Yi Xian, will not care about the lives of the people of Xia and completely not look at the big picture. As Yi Xian entered their ears, everyone's expressions changed, causing the atmosphere in the conference room to become oppressive. Yi Xian paced around the conference room. His face was expressionless, but with every step he took, it was as if he was stepping on everyone's hearts, making them feel breathless. The Martial Security Bureau has gathered many ancient martial ability users in order to protect the country. Half a year ago, before the world was in chaos, a terrorist attack happened in the capital of Xia country. Yi Xian paused for a moment. His voice gradually became sinister as he said, "For such an important matter, the dignified Wuhan agency can't even find a single clue. Is it really impossible? Or perhaps you didn't even think of looking for it." Yi Xian directly tore apart this layer of window paper, leaving no room for the 8 team leaders. The Martial Security Bureau had been established in Xia country for hundreds of years. Who would believe that they couldn't find the mastermind? Yi Xian did not need to think to guess the truth. Back then, during the martial arts competition, he had killed the 2 team leaders, Ming Yi and Bai Lang. He had already formed a grudge with the 2 teams, and Tianyu had also suffered at his hands. Half a year ago, Yi Linger was killed. Not to mention whether the other teams were sincere in investigating the matter, just these 3 teams were definitely perfunctory. Half a year had passed, and the world was in chaos. Tianyu and the others used this as an excuse to tactfully reject Yi Xian. They even used the blood soul beast as an excuse to show their helplessness. If Yi Xian threatened them, it would show that Yi Xian did not look at the big picture. This could be said to be a blatant conspiracy. Yi Xian was not in the right at all. If news of this spread to the outside world, it would instead show that Yi Xian was a sinner of Xia country. When Yi Xian exposed the thoughts of Tianyu and the others, it caused their faces to turn pale. Their bodies unconsciously trembled because they discovered that Yi Xian's body was currently filled with dense killing intent as he sinisterly stared at them. Mr. Yi. It's a misunderstanding. A misunderstanding. We've really tried our best." Recalling Yi Xian's vicious methods, Tianyu realized that he had made a huge mistake. He had been playing tricks with Yi Xian. Not only was Tianyu's face pale, but the newly appointed team leaders of the Tian and Xian teams were also trembling uncontrollably. The 2 of them had played a role in this matter. How could they not be afraid? "You guys are afraid of me?" Yi Xian smiled as he walked up to the three of them, but this caused them to stumble back. Their foreheads were sweating profusely, and their knees were trembling uncontrollably. Oh. The team leader forced out a bitter smile. The leader of the Xian group forced a laugh, but his smile was even uglier than crying. He'd personally witnessed the former team leader die at Yi Xian's hands. How could he not feel fear when Yi Xian displayed such an attitude? Mr. Yi, you are a guest of the Earth team, and also a member of the Wuhan department. I will definitely help you find out the culprit behind this. Tian Yu stuttered. He was truly afraid. He could feel that if he were to reject Yi Xian again, he would turn into a cold corpse the next moment. Haha. Yi Xian smiled sinisterly and patted Tian Yu's shoulder affectionately. I won't kill you today, but I'll give you a chance. Within 3 days I want to find out who the culprit behind this is. If you can't find out, you can come back to me with your head. Strong, domineering, fierce. Chapter 119. In the meeting room, only 2 people remained. One was Qinglong and the other was Xueji. These 2 people could be said to be the closest to Yi Xian. There was no need to mention Qinglong's relationship with him, while Xueji naturally stood on Yi Xian's side because of Lu Bai. At this moment, Azure Dragon's face was filled with guilt because half a year had passed. Due to the appearance of the Blood Soul Beast, he'd been fighting all over the place and didn't have the time to find the real culprit behind the scenes. This caused him to feel ashamed when he faced Yi Xian. Mr. Yi, Qinglong is useless. I need you to come personally to solve this. Qinglong bowed, his voice full of guilt. You don't need to blame yourself. This is not your fault. After all, Tian Yu and the others were already dissatisfied with me. How could I make the Wuhan agency work together to find the culprit? Yi Xian smiled. Mr. Yi, why didn't you kill them just now? Xueji was confused. She knew very well what kind of person Yi Xian was, which made her ask. I'm a very reasonable person, and I don't kill innocent people. Although they are dissatisfied with me, it's not enough to make me want to kill them. Yi Xian smiled. Hearing Yi Xian's words, the 3 people's gazes became strange. If someone else said that, they would feel that there was nothing wrong with it. However, when it came from Yi Xian, they felt that it was a fantasy. It was no wonder that the 3 of them thought that way. The side of Yi Xian that he showed was really decisive. He did not seem like a soft-hearted person at all. Although the 3 of them were confused, they did not ask again. Mr. Yi, my master asked me to bring you something. Xueji took out a piece of jade and handed it to Yi Xian. Yi Xian also took it. Without Xueji saying it, Yi Xian knew that it was Lu Bai who asked her to bring this piece of jade. Yi Xian stroked the jade and his eyes lit up. Then he put the jade away and said, Thank Brother Lu for me. Tell him that I have always kept the promise I made in my heart. My master said that Mr. Yi is a dragon among men. In the future, you will definitely ascend to the 9 heavens. To be able to form a good relationship with Mr. Yi today is also our lineage's fortune. Xueji bowed. The Azure Dragon did not understand the conversation between the 2. He had never known that the Desolate Group's group leader had a master. However, it was not appropriate for him to interrupt too much. After all, this was Xue's own secret. Mr. Yi, the world is in chaos now. Terrifying beasts are wreaking havoc all over the world. Even Xia is no exception. Your martial arts are extraordinary. If you can. Without waiting for the Azure Dragon to finish, Yi Xian waved his hand and interrupted him. His expression became solemn as he said, Azure Dragon, on account of our relationship, I have to tell you something. The truly terrifying thing is not these beasts, but the blood souls that are hidden in the human world. They are invisible and formless. Perhaps they are right beside you, but you will not know. As time passes, they will continue to devour blood and qi. Their cultivation will grow day by day. In the future, they will show their true fangs and bring an unimaginable disaster to this world. Let me give you a piece of advice. Leave the Martial Security Bureau as soon as possible and live out your life peacefully. Do not fight with these blood soul beasts again because humans cannot stop their footsteps. As Yi Xian's words entered his ears, the Azure Dragon's expression changed drastically. He could tell from Yixian's words that this Mr. Yixian seemed to be very familiar with these terrifying things that appeared all over the world. No, absolutely not. You don't know. In the past 6 months there was Sword God Yi, Senior Ba Dao and Jixia Academy's martial divine faculty, the Azure Dragon anxiously refuted, but before he could finish, Yixian smiled contemptuously. His gaze became even more profound. Mortals are mortals after all. In terms of life they have already fallen behind. In the future, you will know the true terror of these blood-soul beasts. Yixian sighed. Bang! All of a sudden, the Azure Dragon suddenly knelt on the ground and kept kowtowing to Yixian. This also made Yixian frown. He said, Azure Dragon, what are you doing? Mr. Yi, since you know so much about these terrifying things, you must have a way to destroy them. The Azure Dragon begs you. For the future of mankind, for the Xia, please save those innocent people. Hearing the Azure Dragon's pleading words, Yixian was stunned and fell into silence. Mr. Yi, you are also from the Xia. Do you really have the heart to watch the people of the Xia die in the mouths of these blood-soul beasts? The Azure Dragon begged bitterly and kept kowtowing to Yixian. Blood flowed from his forehead. People of the Xia? That's right, I do have a way to completely exterminate the blood-soul beast. And it's the land of China that raised me. However, I definitely won't use such a method. Yixian muttered to himself as a trace of self-ridicule flashed through his eyes. Azure Dragon, get up. It's not that I, Yixian, am cold-blooded and heartless, treating the people of the Xia as nothing. It's just that this is the cycle of heaven and earth. Since humans have such a calamity, they can only rely on themselves to get through it. Mr. Yi. Hearing Yixian's resolute words, the Azure Dragon's face turned pale. He wanted to continue persuading Yixian. Azure Dragon, you are a true hero. You are not afraid of death and worry about the country and the people. However, I, Yixian, am not a hero, nor am I an ancient sage. Don't mention this again. After Yixian finished speaking, he turned around and walked towards the outside world. He also let Fatso Huang quickly follow. Looking at Yixian's departing figure, the Azure Dragon's face was filled with unwillingness. He said in a sorrowful voice, Mr. Yi, the Azure Dragon only wants to ask you one thing. Since you have a way to destroy these blood-soul beasts, why are you standing by and watching? Unfortunately, Yixian gradually walked away and did not answer the Azure Dragon's question. This also caused the Azure Dragon to pound his fists on the ground and sink into extreme pain. Mr. Yi, I, Azure Dragon, have misjudged you, but I will never give up. The scorching sun roasted the earth. Yixian walked slowly, releasing an extremely gloomy aura around him. Fatso Huang did not dare to make a sound and silently followed behind him. All of a sudden, Yixian stopped in his tracks. He looked at the world in all directions and murmured, Do you think that I am cold-blooded and heartless, ignoring the fact that humans are gradually being devoured by the blood-soul beasts? You have your own thoughts. This subordinate does not dare to make wild guesses. Fatso Huang bowed, but there was a puzzled look in his eyes. Since Yixian knew the way to completely destroy the blood-soul beasts, why did he stand by and watch? Ha! Yixian laughed self-deprecatingly. His voice was as soft as a mosquito as he said, If I want to destroy the endless blood-soul beasts, I need to set up the 10,000 spirit heaven-killing formation all over the world. With my mere cultivation at the tribulation stage, I will die if I really activate this Tongtian killing formation. Perhaps I am very selfish, but I only want to live. As for the life and death of others, what does it have to do with me? Yixian laughed self-deprecatingly and walked forward slowly. His strange words made Fatso Huang extremely puzzled, but he did not dare to ask. Chapter 120. 3 days passed in the blink of an eye. News of Yixian's return to capital city spread like wildfire, even reaching the ears of some transcendental forces. However, in this new world there were countless experts all over the world. Although Yixian had defeated Li Huantian, he didn't attract much attention under the cover of these experts. After all, the terror of the blood-soul mutated beasts was deeply ingrained in people's hearts. When the experts all over the world displayed their terrifying strength and went to fight these terrifying beasts, Some people added fuel to the fire. These battle scenes were recorded and uploaded onto the internet for all to see, making these experts even more well-known. Chaotic times. Everyone worshipped the strong. Without a doubt, these experts were the hope of humanity. Under the cover of these experts, Yixian's reputation paled in comparison. Capital city, courtyard house, Yixian's residence. It had to be said that the Martial Security Bureau was very efficient. In just 3 days, with Tianyu as the leader and the 7 team leaders as support, a series of clues were presented to Yixian. Mr. Yi, after our repeated investigations, the real culprit behind this should be a foreign man. This person wears a ghost mask all year round and has been hiding in Xia. Tianyu pushed a photo in front of Yixian. In the photo was a man wearing a ghost mask, but the photo was slightly blurry. It was obvious that there had been a lot of shaking when it was taken. Although Yixian had a vague suspicion that this was the work of the ghost mask man, he was finally certain when he saw the photo in front of him. After all, in the entire capital city, only the ghost mask man could take out so many technological weapons. However, Yixian didn't expect that the ghost mask man didn't leave Xia after the Nangong family incident. Instead, he hid in capital city and even dared to make a move on his family half a year ago. Where is the person who took the photo now? Have you found out his true identity? Yixian narrowed his eyes and asked. Tianyu smiled bitterly and shook his head. The person who took the photo is already dead. By the time our people arrived, the other party was already gone. However, they found a large number of technological weapons. In that case, there are still no clues. Yixian frowned. Looking at Yixian's dissatisfied expression, Tianyu's body tensed up as he hurriedly explained, although this person is already dead, we've also discovered an important clue. That means these technological weapons were all smuggled in from abroad. To be able to secretly transport such a large amount of technological weapons into the capital, this grimace man is definitely not a nobody. You mean to say that the masked man is an international businessman on the surface, and that's why he has the ability to transport these weapons to the capital? Yixian asked. That's right. Using this as a lead, we found dozens of famous foreign businessmen in the capital. This is all their information and background. Tianyu quickly pushed a document in front of Yixian. Every page of the document had a picture of a foreign man. Yixian kept flipping through the pages. After a full hour, Yixian closed the document. When he opened and closed his eyes, there was a cold glint in them as he fell into deep thought. Mr. Yi, although these foreign businessmen are very suspicious, their identities are not simple. If we secretly arrest them, it will definitely cause a lot of public criticism, Tianyu said carefully. Dong dong dong. There was a series of knocks on the door. Fatso Huang quickly walked in with a golden invitation in his hand. He bowed and said, Sir, the Martial Arts Heavenly Province has sent an invitation to you to attend a charity banquet tomorrow. No time. Fatty Huang's expression froze when he heard Yixian's refusal. He probed in a low voice, Mr. The Martial Heavenly Palace is extremely powerful, and was created by the absolute Heaven Saber God. Do you want to reconsider, Yixian frowned and immediately stopped Fatso Huang's words. He quickly turned and left. Obviously, he could see Yixian's dissatisfaction. If he continued to talk nonsense, he would definitely be scolded by Yixian. Mr. Yi, the Martial Arts Heavenly Province is at its peak, and has the potential to suppress our Martial Security Department. If you don't give the Martial Arts Heavenly Province any face, I'm afraid that this absolute Heaven Sword God. Tianyu wanted to say something but stopped. This is not something you should be concerned about. Yixian sneered. Tianyu was embarrassed and did not say anything else. Tap tap tap. Yixian's fingers tapped on the table, making rhythmic sounds. After a full 10 breaths, Yixian's fingers paused. He looked up at Tianyu and said, Hold a business banquet in the name of the Martial Security Department and invite these foreign businessmen. I want to meet them personally. Yes, Mr. Yi. Tianyu bowed and left. From the beginning to the end, he had a respectful expression. From this, it could be seen that Yixian had become the #1 person in the Martial Security Department. No one dared to disobey his orders. As Tianyu left, Yixian's face darkened. The masked man dared to attack his family, and Yixian had already sentenced him to death. Crack. Suddenly, while Yi Xian was deep in thought, the sound of jade breaking came from outside. It was mixed with extremely disdainful scolding. This also made Yi Xian's face turn gloomy. Don't think that your master is invincible just because he defeated Li Huanjin. In front of the martial arts heavenly province, no one dares to refuse our invitation. In the courtyard house, a young man was arrogant and scolding Fatso Huang loudly. Fatso Huang's face was full of flattery and he kept nodding and bowing. The rest of the death god's guards looked on coldly and did not say anything. Creak. The door was pushed open and Yi Xian walked out slowly. When the young man saw Yi Xian appear, not only did he not show any respect, he even sneered and said, "You must be Mr. Yi Xian, right? You're so arrogant that you dare to refuse the invitation of the martial arts heavenly province. Don't you know who founded the martial arts heavenly province?" Unfortunately, Yi Xian directly ignored this person. His expression was slightly cold as he said, "Fatty Huang, if you can't even do something like this, what use do I have for you?" After Yi Xian said that, he turned around and returned to the house. This made Fatso Huang's expression change drastically. His flattering smile suddenly turned gloomy and his eyes were filled with viciousness as he looked at the young man. Seeing that Yi Xian ignored him, the young man seemed to have been greatly insulted and shouted angrily, "Hey, I'm talking to you. Can't you hear me?" Bang! With a muffled sound, his bones broke. Before the young man could react, he was thrown out like a kite with a broken string. A large amount of blood spurted out of his mouth and he completely fainted on the ground. Fatso Huang's face was vicious as he said to the death god's guards, "Break his limbs, destroy his cultivation, and throw him out." "Yes, leader." The death god's guards smiled viciously and left to carry out the order. In the house, Yi Xian sat cross-legged. As he breathed in and out, streams of blood energy inhaled and exhaled from his mouth and nose. He was already immersed in his own cultivation. As for the so-called martial heavenly palace, how could Yi Xian place it in his eyes? Chapter 121. Mountain River Pavilion. This was a 5-star hotel. In the entire country of China, it was an extremely high-end place. In a place like the capital where every inch of land was worth its weight in gold, to be able to open a hotel like the Mountain River Pavilion, the power behind it was naturally not simple. That's right, the boss behind the Mountain River Pavilion was the Martial Security Department. This was also a high-end hotel under the Martial Security Department. Mountain Sea Hall. It was resplendent and luxurious. A bright red carpet, polite waiters and expensive ingredients were placed on the table. In the middle of the Mountain River Hall, Yi Xian sat in the main seat. On his left and right were Tianyu and Fatso Huang, and on his right and left were the various team leaders and guests of the Martial Security Department. This was a business banquet held by the Martial Security Department. However, in the entire Mountain Sea Hall, other than Yi Xian and the others, the so-called business celebrities were nowhere to be seen, let alone those international businessmen. Right now, Yi Xian was in a very bad mood. Really bad. When Yi Xian was in a bad mood, someone would definitely be unlucky. Tianyu was extremely embarrassed and his face was flushed red. The other team leaders and guests were the same. They did not expect that after the Martial Security Department sent out the invitation, not to mention these foreign businessmen, even the local business celebrities did not come to the banquet. Contempt, disregard, humiliation. These simple words explain the current situation of the Martial Security Department. I need you to give me a reasonable explanation. In the oppressive atmosphere, Yi Xian spoke calmly. However, when Tianyu and the others heard this, their hearts turned cold. They did not know how to answer Yi Xian's question. "Mr. Yi, the Martial Heavenly Palace is also holding a charity banquet today. I believe these businessmen..." Fatso Huang wanted to say something but stopped. However, the atmosphere in the Mountain Sea Hall immediately became heavy. Heh! A cold smile appeared on Yi Xian's lips. He looked around at Tianyu and the others and said in a strange voice, "The dignified Martial Security Department has stood tall in China for 100 years. Now, even a Martial Heavenly Palace has suppressed you. Don't you feel ashamed?" "Mr. Yi, you don't know. Tianyu's face flushed red as he hurriedly explained. The martial Tao heavenly abode was created by the Absolute Sword God. 100 years ago, the Absolute Sword God was the fifth most powerful man in the world. Legend has it that he had broken through the Xiantian realm and stepped into the Earth God realm. Countless disciples from various ancient martial arts families have joined the martial Tao heavenly abode. Without waiting for Tianyu to finish speaking, Yi Xian's expression darkened as he waved his hand to interrupt him. His gaze towards Tianyu and the others gradually became sinister. This is the reason you gave me? Yi Xian said coldly. Instantly, the temperature in the air plummeted, as though a cold wind was blowing at the backs of Tianyu and the others, causing them to feel as though they had fallen into an ice cellar. Do you know that what happened today is not only a disgrace to you, but also a disgrace to me, Yi Xian? Yi Xian narrowed his eyes. His voice was calm, but it caused Tianyu and the others to tremble uncontrollably. Their faces were extremely pale as they were clearly unsettled by Yi Xian's words. Suddenly, Yi Xian stood up from his seat. A 3-foot-long blood sword strangely appeared in his hand. When Yi Xian slashed out with his sword, the terrified screams of many waiters could be heard. Bang! The sword flashed across the sky and the banquet was shattered. Under Yi Xian's sword, the so-called business banquet was reduced to a pile of debris. Tianyu and the others were nervous, not daring to say anything. Fatso Huang. Yes, sir. I'll give you 3 minutes to find out where the martial Tao heavenly abode is hosting the banquet. As soon as Yi Xian's voice fell, Fatty Huang's expression turned into one of shock. However, he quickly accepted the order and left. On the other hand, Tianyu and the others were stunned for a moment before their expressions quickly turned to fear. Mr. Yi, what do you want to do? Tianyu trembled as a sense of unease rose in his heart. What do I want to do? Yi Xian's lips curled into a cold smile. Then he looked at Tianyu and the others strangely. You can be shameless, but do you want me, Yi Xian, to be humiliated here with you? Since these businessmen are going to the martial Tao heavenly abodes banquet, what do you think I want to do? Looking at Yi Xian's gloomy face, Tianyu and the others couldn't help but swallow their saliva. Their faces were filled with fear. A guest elder quickly stood out and advised Yi Xian with a trembling voice, Mr. Yi, you can't do this. The martial Tao heavenly abode is like the sun in the sky, and it was founded by the absolute heaven blade God. If you go and cause trouble, I'm afraid there will be a huge rift between the martial Tao heavenly abode and the martial Tao heavenly abode. That's right. Although the absolute heaven blade God isn't in the capital, the martial Tao heavenly abode is full of disciples of various ancient martial arts clans. If the martial Tao heavenly abode confronts the martial Tao heavenly abode, there will definitely be a conflict. As the saying goes, pull one hair and the whole body will be affected. Mr. Yi, please bear with it for now and don't get into a conflict with the martial Tao heavenly abode. As if a chain effect had occurred, everyone began to advise Yi Xian. Everyone's faces were pale. It was obvious that they were extremely fearful of a transcendent power like the martial heavenly palace. You guys are really a bunch of trash. Yi Xian shook his head in disappointment. His words didn't leave any face for the crowd, causing them to feel ashamed. They didn't dare to meet Yi Xian's gaze. Mister, I've found it. The martial Tao heavenly abode is holding a banquet at the Immensity Sea House. All the celebrities of the business world are there. Fatso Huang was extremely efficient. When he returned to Yi Xian's side, he quickly reported to him. You've done well. Yi Xian slowly nodded, then took a deep look at Tianyu and the others. Under everyone's panicked gazes, Yi Xian slowly walked out, and Fatso Huang quickly followed. What should we do? The leader of the Xian group said with a trembling voice. Mr. Yi is right. How could our dignified martial Tao heavenly abode be afraid of us? Shueji's face was filled with disdain as she quickly chased after Yi Xian. That damned azure dragon. Where did he find such a god? Does he think our martial Tao heavenly abode isn't chaotic enough? A guest said hatefully. Alright, Azure Dragon isn't here. What's the point of saying all this? Tianyu reprimanded. Sir Tianyu, what should we do now? Someone carefully probed. Seeing Yi Xian already far away, Tianyu's face was filled with hesitation as if he was considering something. After several breaths, He clenched his teeth as if he had made a decision. He said, although this Mr. Yi is arrogant and has threatened us from time to time, he's still a guest of the martial Dao heavenly abode. If we just sit back and do nothing, we'll be laughed at by the outside world. Let's go. We'll accompany this Mr. Yi. After all, if anything happens, he'll take responsibility. As Tianyu finished speaking, he led everyone to chase after Yixian. A banquet held by the martial Dao heavenly abode had become a joke. However, no one knew that this joke wasn't funny at all. This was because Yixian would let everyone know what would happen if they made fun of him. Yixian. Tonight was destined to be a sleepless night. No one knew what would happen. Chapter 122. Vast Sea Restaurant. It was a hubbub of voices and the atmosphere was warm. Countless business celebrities shuttled back and forth in the banquet. They greeted each other in twos and threes, holding red wine glasses in their hands and chatting with smiles from time to time. Gu Dingtian, the deputy mansion master of the martial arts heavenly palace, was beaming with joy at this moment. He smiled at the compliments of many business celebrities, giving people a sense of dignity. Gu Dingtian was very proud. Although he was only a martial arts grandmaster and had not even reached the primordial realm, he had great power in his hands. As the master of the Gu family, Gu Dingtian felt that it was the best choice he had ever made in his life since he relied on the towering heaven blade god. He liked the current world very much. In the previous world, the ancient martial arts families had hidden themselves. With the deterrence of technological weapons, they did not dare to act recklessly and could only live in seclusion. But now the world was different. The blood soul exotic beasts were wreaking havoc all over the world, and technological weapons were of little use. The only thing he could count on was the ancient martial arts warriors. Even the martial security department, which he had once regarded as a giant, was nothing in Gu Dingtian's eyes now. It was Gu Dingtian's idea to hold this charity banquet. After all, more and more ancient martial artists were joining the martial arts heavenly palace, and all kinds of cultivation resources needed money to buy. Gu Dingtian felt very proud of himself. After he sent out the invitations, all the business celebrities of the state of Xia and foreign multinational businessmen came to attend. This was something that Gu Dingtian would never have dared to think about in his previous world. Although Gu Dingtian knew that there were a total of 8 deputy mansion masters in the martial arts heavenly palace and he was the weakest among them, he was regarded highly by the Heaven Blade God and was given great power to manage the entire martial arts heavenly palace. Gu Dingtian enjoyed the feeling of being in a high position, and could not help but indulge in it. Because even the primordial realm masters had to respectfully call him Lord Gu when they met, which was something that would never happen in the past. Lord Gu is very busy every day. In order to train us human cultivators to fight against the mutated beasts, it can be said that you have worked hard and contributed greatly. Let us toast to Lord Gu, a merchant said flatteringly. You can't say that. The martial arts heavenly palace was created by Saber God to protect the people of the Xia. I'm just dealing with some trivial matters for Saber God. The one who really worked hard is Saber God. Gu Dingtian pretended to be dissatisfied, but his eyes were full of complacency. Lord Gu is right. Without Senior Saber God, how could we, the merchants, be as safe as we are now? I'm afraid that we would have been slaughtered by those terrifying beasts long ago. But Lord Gu, you don't have to be modest. If not for your support, how could the martial heavenly palace be as grand as it is today? That's right. Right now, there are many experts in the martial Dao heavenly palace, fighting on the front lines for the people of China. Lord Gu has worked hard and contributed greatly. This is something that everyone can see. Isn't that right? With all kinds of flattery from the businessmen, a lot of responses came. Although Gu Dingtian didn't say anything, there was a sense of complacency in his eyes. Ahem. Gu Dingtian coughed slightly and pretended to be serious, saying, "Today I call you here to raise funds. After all, you know that the warriors of the martial Dao heavenly palace are fighting with the exotic beasts day and night, and casualties are inevitable. However, funds are a shortcoming. Today I am ashamed to ask you for help, but I have no other choice." Lord Gu, what are you talking about? Without the martial Dao heavenly palace, how could we be where we are today? Lianyun Group is willing to donate 10 million. Dingsheng Group is willing to donate 20 million. Lotus Group is willing to donate 50 million. Suddenly, all kinds of donations came from the charity party. The local business celebrities of the Xia spoke one after another, which made Gu Dingtian smile and nod his head to express his gratitude. Mr. Gu, although I am not from the Xia, I have lived in the Xia for many years. Now that the exotic beasts are wreaking havoc all over the world, as a member of the human race, the Moore Group is willing to donate 1 billion yuan to the Martial Dao Heavenly Palace. A blond man came out from the crowd. He had fair skin and was extraordinarily handsome. He had the unique temperament of a Western aristocrat, which made people feel inferior at first sight. Mr. Michel, you are too polite. I would like to express my highest gratitude to you on behalf of the Martial Dao Heavenly Palace. Gu Dingtian looked excited and hurried to the man. His attitude was extremely friendly. It was no wonder that Gu Dingtian behaved like this, because the identity of the blond man was extremely special. He was the president of the Moore Group's branch in the Xia, and the Moore Group was ranked in the top 100 in the world. It could be said that the Moore Group was a super business empire in business and in various fields. How could Gu Dingtian not pay attention to it? Mr. Gu, you are too polite. Sword Saint Sith and Saber God are close friends, and Sword Saint Sith is the patron saint of the Moore Group. This money is just a small token of appreciation from the Moore Group to Saber God, Michel said with a smile. Sword Saint Sith. Gu Dingtian was stunned, and then hurriedly asked, is she the senior Sith who cut off the mountain and killed hundreds of exotic beasts in the West? Yes, she is. The blond man nodded with a smile. After getting the affirmative answer from the blond man, Gu Dingtian's attitude became more friendly. He took the blond man's hand intimately, as if they were close friends who had not seen each other for many years. Mr. Michel, I didn't expect the Martial Dao Heavenly Palace to have such a relationship with the Moore Group. Today we must get drunk. Gu Dingtian said kindly. Bang! All of a sudden, a loud noise came and interrupted their conversation. The banquet door was blown up in an instant. Many businessmen in the banquet were shocked and looked toward the door. A slender figure, a bloodthirsty demon sword, and gray hair draped behind his head. Yixian walked in calmly. When he looked around at everyone present, many merchants immediately sucked in a breath of cold air. Yixian? The guest of the Earth Group of the Martial Security Department. Is he Yixian who defeated Li Huantian? All kinds of discussions were heard. The blond man was stunned by the sudden appearance of Yixian. There was a flash of fear in his eyes, and he stepped back quietly. Someone reported to the Martial Security Department that a large number of traitors were plotting a rebellion in the Immensity C building. Now, everyone present, please follow me back to the Martial Security Department for investigation. Slander, blatant slander, and even more so, an extremely clumsy framing. However, this was the attitude that Yixian displayed. After Yixian finished his words, Tianyu and others quickly appeared behind him with complicated expressions. They had never thought that Yixian would be so bold as to frame so many people in such a blatant way. Yixian, we are all decent businessmen. How can you slander us? That's right. This is a charity banquet organized by Lord Gu. How can there be a conspiracy to rebel? Mr. Yi, although you are a guest of the Martial Security Department, you can't disregard the law and frame others like this, right? The businessmen present rebuked angrily. It was obvious that being labeled a traitor by Yixian was not a joke. It was an extremely taboo. The law? Hey, I am the law. A cruel sneer appeared on Yixian's lips. He looked around at the crowd and said in a sinister voice, if I say that you are traitors, then you are traitors. If I say that you are plotting a rebellion, then you are plotting a rebellion. Yixian did not need to hide anything. He was telling everyone present that he, Yixian, had slandered them. What could they do? What are you waiting for? Take them all away. Yixian frowned and reprimanded Tianyu and the others. Tianyu and the others' expressions changed, but they did not dare to disobey Yixian's order. They could only lead the crowd to stride towards the businessmen. It seemed that Yixian was really going to arrest them. You're tuning into the Li Mei's Wuxia Whispers YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support. And don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.